Welcome everybody. We got a lot of people flowing in here, so hi to all of you. So welcome to the live stream system. I'm AJ Roberts, and alongside me is Jason Fladlin. He's known as the $100 million man.
A lot of money.
Probably more than that, but we're rounded there, you know, be fair. And over the next 3 days, we're going to be creating the live stream system course to help you, create, connect, and sell via webinars. And we really have some amazing content. You may be wondering why we would do this. It's kind of something that a few people have been saying, like, why the heck would you give all this away? We were talking before. Why don't you tell them what we were saying?
AJ, you know what upsets me is seeing somebody who could do something amazing and then not do it. And so I feel like it is my moral obligation to help more people get online and use webinars, because obviously they served me well. They've served you well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I feel like if we can help people become more successful using what I think is the most powerful way that anybody can take on the digital world and do really well with it, well, why not?
Yeah, it absolutely irks me, running WebinarJam and EverWebinar. We have customers who are making 6 figures, 7 figures a month with webinars. And so to hear that webinars are dead, or the webinars don't work, or that a video on a page is better than a webinar, it's disappointing, because I know the facts based on what I can see our users doing and our own experience running webinars ourselves, as can you.
Yeah, I mean, when everybody thinks the world is flat and you're the only one that knows it's round, it's a very lonely place. And so eventually everybody will realize that the world is in fact round, and that we revolve around the sun doesn't revolve around us. But until that day comes, it is tough. It is an uphill battle that we're willing to take on, because we feel like it is in your best interest. And if we can serve you, then maybe one day we'll win your business.
Yeah. So really, little housekeeping before we get started, and we won't take too much time here. We'll get straight into the content, but we are going to be going live, and we probably won't take any breaks, because we have a lot of content to go over the next few hours. You want to make sure that you have a pen and paper handy, or something to take notes on, so that you can make sure you get everything you need out of this. Also, I would advise shut down any other browsers you have. Put your cell phone on Do Not Disturb, so that you can be focused for the next couple of hours and over the next 3 days, because the content we're going to give you really can change your life. And I don't say that lightly. We've experienced it not only for ourselves, for our clients, but we want you to experience it too. And I think that if you take this seriously and you really focus down, you'll see how easy this is. It's not simple. There's a lot of steps to do it, but how easy it is to put into your business. And in our opinion, it's one of the most powerful, most efficient ways to promote and sell products, services, or anything else you can think of.
That's right. And we have a lot of people online, and more that even registered, that will be trickling in as we go through these next 3 days. And so I feel like if we just get one of you to implement what we say, it'll be worth it. So are you the one though? We'll figure that one out. So let's jam, my friend.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's just get right into it. I think best place to start is, what is a webinar, right?
Yeah, so let's define it. So I put together a few slides, and this is one of the slides, the starting slide that I thought was important, is what exactly is a webinar? Now, I've obsessed over this definition for many years, and I think this is the best definition that I can give to you. It is a live or automated web event that uses information to either immediately make a sale or move a sale forward. Now, there's a lot to that statement, because is a webinar live? It can be, and there are times when it should be. Is a webinar automated? Well, there are times when that makes more sense, and we will probably be discussing with you when those times are to use one or the other. When somebody asks me, Jason, should I use a live or an automated? You know what I say to them? Yes, right? There is no, you don't have to do one or the other. There's nothing that says if I do this, I can't do that. Now, we use the word information, uses information to move a sale forward. In every single instance, a more informed consumer is a better consumer. They will do business with you, they will do it with you more often, and they will do it with you at higher prices. But you say, Jason, I'm not in the information business. I guess I can't use webinars then. No, I didn't say we had to sell information. We use information. Even when you buy like a car or a house or anything else, you are using information to help you make a decision. And you want to make the best decision. And that's what everybody wants. And so therefore, if we can empower the customer to make a better decision, they will make that decision with us. Now, here's the other thing. Not everything can be sold on a one-off kind of a deal. You can't just say, hey, listen, let me show you the house one time, and then at the end of the tour, you have to buy it or get the heck out of here, right? Sometimes we use webinars not to make a purchase event at the end, but to have them move one step closer to making an investment. So if you sell services or you sell stuff that has multi-touches, what if your multi-touch follow-up sequence goes from 6 touches to 2 touches? Would that be something that would be helpful in your business? What if you went from having to spend 15 hours wrestling mom and dad to make a decision to spending 15 minutes figuring out what the best decision was for them to make? Would that help you? Well, that's one of the ways that a webinar can achieve this. Essentially, what we do is we take the best elements of selling, which is one-to-one, and we are allowed to now do that in a one-to-many scenario. So whether there's 10 people on your webinar or 1,000 people on your webinar, you can still have the same punch and the same impact. And at the end of the day, that's what we do. We connect as one person to another person, regardless of whatever we sell or want to sell, and the webinar does that. So question, who here thinks a webinar makes sense for them in their business? There's a chat box. Would you believe we're actually live? This isn't automated technology. We're not robot holographic individuals, right? My watch says it's like 10 minutes, or it's 5 minutes past the hour here at 11 o'clock Pacific time, and you can interact with us. In fact, we are watching the chat, are we not, AJ?
Yeah, we have the chat here. So as we go, if you have questions, go ahead and post them in. And we got our team moderating it. They're going to highlight questions for us, and when we're in the right place, we'll go through and answer some of those questions. So we do want this to be interactive, and we want your feedback. We want your questions, and we will shape some of that content as we go around some of the questions that come up. So there's a small delay. So if you write something in and we don't respond right away, that's why. Just because I think there's maybe a 10-second delay. Nothing much, but we can see all your saying hello and that. So appreciate that. And if you're having issues, hopefully the team will take care of you. Looks like we're good. We got great audio. Excellent. And things like that. So going back to webinars, let's talk about why we would do a webinar versus just a live video on, say, Instagram or Facebook or something like that.
Right. So first of all, from a very specific perspective, is nothing beats live. So I can download what's your favorite music or some of your favorite music, AJ? Like, give me a band.
Like the Roots.
The Roots. That's a good band, right? So and that's a great example, actually, because you can download a Roots song on iTunes for what, like 99 cents?
Yeah, 99 cents.
Or you can go see them live in concert for a lot more than 99 cents. Same music, same exact everything, but different experience.
Unfortunately, my wife likes to go live, and she likes to sit VIP and by the stage. So I'm fully aware of the difference there,
God bless her, right?
And oftentimes the sound is never as good as it is, with that iTunes purchase. However, the experience is what makes it so special. And Absolutely. The experience is what people buy into.
People want experience. That's what they want. They don't want products. They don't want services. They want experiences. And oftentimes, and tell me if this is true in your own life, you heard information once and it didn't land or it didn't change you. But then you heard the same information again later, and somehow or another, it did change you. What was the difference? Well, there's a saying that you never step in the same river twice, because you have changed and so has the river. And so oftentimes it's the experience and how you hear the information that changes your responsiveness towards that information. So if you're like just browsing the web and you see a sales letter and you start to read it, it doesn't have that much impact. But if it's an event where you put the kids to bed early, you know, you put on your best clothes and you go out there and you have a good time, same music, same message, same whatever, different impact. At the end of the day, no matter what you're selling, you are selling transformation from who they are now to who they want to become or to they want to aspire to be. And so if we give them a taste of the future and the present, they are more likely to do business with us. And so the webinar gives them that experience. Now, it doesn't have to be live in order to do that.
Right.
Some of the best experiences we have are not done live and in the moment. Like we go to a movie theater to watch a movie that was pre-recorded. It's not Broadway. They're not doing it in real time, yet we still go. And it's more powerful to have that movie in the theater than it is watching it on your little iPhone at home under the covers, right?
Yeah, you look at any popular TV show, for instance, Game of Thrones, you know, there was watch parties every single week. Now, they weren't doing that live. They had finished filming many, many months before it ever came out. The cast was on to probably the next movie or the next TV show that they're involved in. But every single week on Sunday, people got together and around the release of the show. And that's really what we're talking about here. I think a lot of people don't understand that, you know, one of the most powerful ways to sell anything is from the stage. And the reason for that is because people take the time to go somewhere. They travel from their home to an event. They take the time to sit inside a room. They set time aside for that. And they have the undivided attention. You know, the speaker has their undivided attention. And obviously to travel around and speak on as many stages as possible, for some people may be their dream, but to be gone from your family, gone from your home, and turn that into a business, you know, now we don't have to with the power of webinars, but the webinar gives us that same environment. And that's really key, is the environment you're surrounded in. You know, if you're walking down the aisle, you know, you're shopping at your grocery store, and you also happen to be going through Facebook at the same time on your phone, and there's a live video, you're not going to stop and watch that. You know, however, if there's a, you know, registration and then there's a time set, you're going to register, you're going to put that in your calendar, and you're going to show up and pay attention because you've made the time for that. And what that does is it changes the person from curious to serious. And that's really what a webinar does. It's really about moving them from, you know, maybe I'm interested to I'm absolutely interested. They've raised their hand. They've taken that first step forward with you. And whether you're selling something or just giving them information to move them to the next thing, you know, the webinar is going to do that at a much better conversion percentage than anything else, even if you have less people show up, because the reality is the people that show up are the right people. And so your message is not going out to millions of people who don't care. It's going to those that do care, that are more likely to move forward with you in whatever journey you're putting in front of them.
Absolutely. So, I mean, on a very specific level, here's what we're in. Number one reason I like webinars: they're valuable in and of themselves. How many times have you watched an advertisement and say, wow, I'm glad that somebody's advertising to me? And the answer is almost never. If you watched the Super Bowl recently, they try to sneak in advertisements under the guise of entertainment. So like the Bill Murray Groundhog's Day was the most popular commercial. What was he selling? Nobody even remembers. So it's entertainment valuable, but it's not valuable necessarily in a way that can move the sale forward. So a webinar in and of itself is, if you follow our approach that we're going to teach over the next 3 days, will be valuable in and of itself. Can you imagine an advertisement that people are eager to consume? What better thing is there? People typically say, oh, I don't want an ad, but I guess I'll put up with it. And that's how most people try to make money. Instead, we lead with value. We give value first, we ask secondly. But the caveat here is we don't give value first, wait until the earth rotates around the sun 365 days and then try to make money. We give value and then we make money, all in the same single setting. So it's hyper efficient. Second reason here is it's versatile. And so there are so many instances where I can plug a webinar into any business. And I've done this with some of the biggest businesses that exist, even including Zoom. So Zoom brought me in to teach them how to do webinars. And they're a platform that supposedly knows how to do webinars. They're a tech company. One of the reasons why I like working with AJ is he's a marketer who uses tech. He's not a tech company who doesn't understand marketing. So they're versatile. I can go into any situation, plug a webinar into it, and make whatever's working better. So when AJ earlier said the concept of what happens if I'm, hanging out in the shopping center and I'm also going to the Facebook newsfeed. Let's say you actually did stop and watch one of those videos, which is highly unlikely, but let's just say that you did. Whatever you're doing there, if that's working, put it into a webinar format and watch it multiply like rabbits and work even more effectively. And so there is not a single instance where I have seen where adding a webinar hurts a business. I've only seen it help a business. And so it's very versatile. So using this, doesn't it make sense for you to want to master a skill that can be plopped into pretty much any business? Because a lot of these other techniques that I've seen and pioneered, and that you've pioneered throughout the years, they work in one specific instance to one specific market and one specific use case. They work well, we should do them, but they don't have versatility. So we exchanged that scalability and versatility for that. And lastly, my favorite reason, they just make more money. I have not found, if you do them the way that we will teach you, I have not found a better way for time in versus money out. If there is, I will gladly give up webinars. Trust me, I want to make money laying in a hammock, sipping a fruity beverage, feet kicked up, hanging out with my family and my dogs. That's how I want to make money. I haven't figured that out yet. So instead, I got to do the least amount of effort and work to provide the most amount of value and get the most amount of profits. And so I'm looking for something to replace webinars. And I've been looking for the last 12 years, haven't found it yet. And so it's just, if you want to be in the business of helping and earning, the webinar is my favorite thing.
Yeah, and once you have an automated webinar, it does get you closer to that dream lifestyle. But just like anything, what we were talking about earlier before we went live was that you'll find that most very, very successful businesses, webinars are a part of their marketing strategy, and oftentimes are one of the very first things they start with. And so we're not saying that webinars are the only thing you should do,
Absolutely
but to be the most effective, we haven't found anything that beats that, especially live webinars. And then the automated webinar, we'll get into more details with that. Let's just take a look at a couple of questions that have come in before we get ahead. But one of the questions, actually a few people have asked, Denise, and Kenny and a couple other people, is about duration. And we're going to get into length specifically later today. One of the things I'll say just now, just to kind of curb the curiosity, is that the duration of your webinar is really dependent on the content of your webinar, which we're going to get into as well. And there is no right length. You'll find people who do very short webinars, 20-minute webinars, who are converting and killing it. Yep. You also have people doing 4-hour webinars into one-day training, and it just goes on. And so the length is really not about the webinar, it's about the content in the webinar, what the purpose of the webinar is, and we're going to go through all of that for you today.
There are best practices, and we'll give you guidelines and suggestions, but they're just that. Anytime I've had a 2-hour webinar work, a 3-hour webinar typically will work better. It's always a give and take. Do I want to spend an extra hour or not? Maybe. But anytime I get a 3-hour webinar working good, usually a 4-hour webinar works even better than a 3-hour webinar. So it's a matter of give and take. How much time do you want to put in? For most of you, I suggest minimum viable webinar, MVW. I just made that up, right?
I love it. I love it.
Minimum viable webinar. What is the least amount of things you have to say to help somebody make a decision that costs them less than making no decision? That's what you want to lead with. And if that works good, you can expand upon it. And then if that works good, you can add stuff before it and you can add stuff after it, right? But the most important part is the vehicle itself, which is the webinar. Less important is whether it's 20 minutes, 40 minutes, or 60 minutes. More important is understanding the structure of the webinar, of how we create transformation, not just inform, but transform. And we're going to dive into that here today. Anything else we should hit before we go crazy?
Nope. I think the only thing is a few people are saying, they're either watching from work or they're, not able to stay for the full amount of time, and there will be a limited replay for the next 24 hours after we're done. Obviously, the disadvantage of that is you won't get to ask any questions or interact with us. So I would highly advise, if you're here right now, you stick out, hang out as long as possible. We understand sometimes life gets in the way, so we'll have that available. But we are planning on selling this, so it's only going to be available until tomorrow when we go live again, and then it will be off the market. And we'll share with you later how you could get a hold of this. But right now it's live, and we're glad you're here, and we hope you stay with us to the end.
All right, let's talk about the structure of a webinar. So, and by the way, there are 7 separate webinar models that I have designed throughout the year. So there's not one that's better than any other, or there's not one that works at the expense of all others. I have some of the most complicated webinar structures known to man. I have 26-part webinar sequences where this and this and this and this and this and this. But, you know, we're playing to the stakes of millions of dollars, and this is all I do for a living for the most part, right? So my goal here today is to look at the 7 different formats of how we can do a webinar and simplify it down so somebody who's never done a webinar could do this immediately and make money with us. And so what AJ and I came up with, and what we worked really hard and obsessed over, is what is the thing that somebody could understand the first time they do it. So I went through the hundreds of webinars that I've been successful with. I identified this pattern, and we broke this down, and we're going to focus on this today. And the anatomy of a successful webinar looks like this: story, message, offer. That's it. Just those 3 parts. You have to have a story. The story has to convey a message that will make somebody say, I want that. And then the offer is the vehicle for them to get that. It is simple, but underneath the simplicity can be the difference between struggling and massive success. So if we want to talk about story, we don't have to invent our own story. There is a story structure that has been existent since time immemorial, that's always existed and always will, that is hardwired for us to be responsive to. So I'm going to break down the components of it, and then we're going to dissect each of these, and we're going to leave each one of you with a story you can tell. Because I know some of you are thinking, well, Jason, I don't have a story. And I say, why are you lying to me right now? Because you do have a story. You just don't realize you have a story. Does it have to be only your story? Not necessarily. But here's the thing. Kids are not raised on webinars. When I was a young lad, my mom didn't tuck me in and tell me a webinar story at night. She just told me a story, right? She didn't open up the laptop and say, watch this webinar to go to bed. She read me a story. And stories are something that's ingrained in our culture. And so putting a story into a webinar is super effective. Now, by the way, and AJ mentioned this earlier, try telling a story on a static sales page. It's possible, but it's a lot harder because it's not an event. People are on a sales page with one finger hovering over the X button on that browser, looking for any excuse or reason to leave. But when they show up purposefully to an event, they are now engaged and they are active and they can be captivated. And that's why a story can be super effective at doing that. They will give you the runway in which to tell your story. And that's important because until they know your story, they're not going to resonate with your message. And so let's start with a basic structure, and then I'm going to show you how to niche this down specifically to webinars. Because if you try to do this like they taught on how to do this, telling stories, if we're selling fiction books and stuff like this, it won't work. We have to adjust it to the context of the webinar. So call to adventure. So AJ, let's start with your call to adventure. How did you know when this was the thing for you to do?
I think, when I was in college, I was planning to be a strength and conditioning coach. And I was volunteering, and I was at D1 school, University of Idaho. I was volunteering in the weight room. And I was there one day, and the assistant strength and conditioning coach was on the phone talking to a debt collector who was trying to collect what he owed him for his student loans. And I'd never asked what a strength and conditioning coach makes before. And when I found out, I was in shock. And there was a guy named Eric Cressy who was a writer for T Nation, and he had created a DVD product called Magnificent Mobility. And so he was an information marketer who was also a strength and conditioning coach.
Nice.
And he happened to be a powerlifter, and I was a competitive powerlifter at the time. So I reached out to him to ask, how do you do this? And he introduced me to the world of information marketing. And I went to my first conference, and after that, I was like, I'm going to do this. So I interviewed a series of experts, put together an information product, launched it to the marketplace, and had some success. Right. I didn't have huge success, but I had enough success to show me, hey, you can make money with this thing online. And that was really that first call to adventure where it was, I had a path that I was on. I found out that it wasn't the right path and realized it wasn't going to serve me. And then I had this call to do something else. And that's really, that call to adventure was really away from everything I thought I was going to be. And as soon as I saw a different way, it was the path that I wanted to take.
And in fact, what's so great about this is, and AJ is such a natural at this, is he already jumped several steps ahead of us. What he just told us is almost already an intact, full journey, full adventure, full story. But someday he woke up and said, I'm going to make a decision today that's going to forever change the course of my life.
Yeah. And we see the call to adventure a lot. We just had the New Year, but every New Year we have this where, people make their New Year's resolutions. That is a call to adventure. Yep. Right? That is when your intuition tells you something's not right, life could be better, and you're called to make a change. Now, oftentimes, a lot of people won't listen to that call to adventure. And so right here in the beginning of the story, for some of you, you may have a journey you've took on, and as we go through, you'll see, but it may have taken you 5, 6, maybe 10 times or more of refusal of the call. And oftentimes you're in this loop between your intuition tells you something's not right, I got to make a change, and trying different things. Yep. And it's not until you actually commit to make the change, and we'll get to that later, but as we go through, I want you to think about that. What is that call to adventure? You'll see this in a lot of movies. Star Wars is a great example. If you're not a Star Wars fan, watch it for the purpose of, as we go through. Skywalker is called to the adventure. He refuses it. He returns home. Yeah. His family has been killed, and now he sets off on his venture. So this refusal of the call, we see in a lot of ways. My daughter, she's 18 months, and she loves Moana. Well, Moana is called to the sea, but her dad pulls her back. Finally, she accepts that, no, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to take care of the village. Her grandma dies. She now realizes she has to set out on the path that she's set for. So oftentimes with the call to adventure, it's met with resistance, either with you or for some of you, if it's not your story, if it's someone else's story, you may be the mentor, the coach, you may be the advisor. The call to adventure may be when they first contact you, and then they don't purchase. Oftentimes, if you're a personal trainer, for example, you'll sit down across the table for someone, and they came in to change their life, and then they choose not to. It's not a refusal to work with you. It's a refusal to that call to adventure. So have a think about where in your life have you been called to an adventure? Yep. You step forward, but then maybe you turn back around.
We don't have to necessarily be at the end of our journey to sell somebody something either. So your call to adventure is you decided one day to do things differently than how most people do it. All of you, I know for a fact, you would not be here otherwise, because let me tell you what is not normal. Watching two guys in a studio talk about webinars. You can't go out on the street, stop 100 people and say, hey, have you watched a webinar about digital marketing in the last 7 days? They would all look at you like you're insane. And so you are not normal, so you should embrace that. There was something about you who decided to give up and get rid of the status quo, which is why you are qualified to be listened to, because you're not going to give them the same old, same old. So that's the first concept, is the call to action. Now, meeting a mentor. None of us succeed alone, okay? There is a myth of the self-made person, the self-made man, the self-made woman. And so AJ, in his story, already told you he met a mentor one day who forever opened his eyes to an alternative way of doing things. So my call to adventure was that, I hated being broke so much because my family was broke. They were both teachers, and I'm a teacher now, right? But my dad was a high school teacher and my mom was a preschool teacher. And between the two of those, we made just enough money to barely afford public housing, and we were on food stamps. We were broke. We were beyond broke. We made broke people look like they were well off. That's how bad we were. And it was a sad, miserable existence. And I always felt like we deserved more than what we had. But the day that changed my life forever is when I fell out of a tree. I was about 10 years old. And I don't know if we can get a close-up of this, if there's Zoom functionality or not. Probably not. Oh my God, Sassy's over here. We're manually doing this. You probably can't see this. Where am I at? I have a scar on my hand right here. Barely visible with the lights, right? 10 stitches. So I was about 10 years old. I don't know if we can see that or not. But when I was 10, I fell out of a tree. It was a Sunday, and blood was gushing from this wound. And I remember falling. I fell about 8 feet, and this blood was shooting out at me. And I remember feeling this pride. I'm not crying. I fell out, but I'm tough, and I didn't get hurt. And then my dad says, what are you doing getting injured on a Sunday? We can't afford to go to the emergency room. And then I started crying, right? It was the emotional pain that hurt me, not the physical pain. And I made a decision that day at the age of, I was less than 10 years old. I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I made a decision to say, I never want to be in the position again in the future that if I were to have children, that I had to tell them that they couldn't get hurt on a certain day because we couldn't afford it. And that was my desire to get rich. Now, it wasn't until 17 years later that I finally felt a vehicle to do that. So that's my call to adventure. My meeting a mentor was the first time that somebody put the book Think and Grow Rich into my hands, right? And actually they put Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret. And he was a painter. He's a guy that painted houses. And he said to me, he goes, this is the secret. If you want to get rich, here's the secret. And so my mentor turned me on to a whole different way of approaching things. Now, if you don't have a personal mentor in your life, you have a mentor like AJ and I are your mentors right now. We can be the mentor for you, or some book or somebody or something has changed your life. For many people, it's the Bible. The Bible was their mentor, and then they applied it in a specific fashion. It doesn't matter what the artifact is or the person. It's just the fact is you have a mentor. Now, from a sales perspective, this is what's really cool. Anytime you tell a story, you know what your audience does? They replace you with them. And so in hypnosis, because I studied a lot of hypnosis, like Milton Ericksonian conversational hypnosis, because when I started in this business, I looked for every edge, big or small. Now, I implore you to do the same thing because I want to outvalue my competition, so I want to have tools and resources that they don't have. And what I discovered was part of conversational hypnosis was the use of stories because people will automatically put themselves in the role of the main character. This is why we watch movies. And so telling a story, when somebody hears your story, they see themselves in that position. Well, what would I have done if I would have fell out of the tree? What would I have done if I was in AJ's position? How would I have responded? And they want to respond in the way that's appropriate. You're giving them a roadmap of response. And then meeting the mentor. Well, guess what you are to them on the webinar? You are now their mentor. You showed them that it's smart and that it makes sense because you went first and you listened to a mentor. So it's okay for you to be their mentor. Yeah. And that's really powerful.
And I think, one of the things to understand here, depending on where you are in your business, you may only have your story. And so if you're listening right now, go ahead in the chat. If you can think of a story where you were called to an adventure, you met a mentor, go ahead and just type yes so that we can see that you guys are getting this. But I also want to branch into the fact that you may already be the mentor. You may already have the case studies. And if you have stories of 1, 2, or 3, or more clients, you want to think about what was there going on before they met you. Often when I do testimonial case study gathering, the first question I ask them is, what was life like before AJ? I want to know where they were before, what they were going through. My wife, she's a nutritionist. She'll ask them what diets they've tried before because we want to know everything they've tried and failed. Because the idea here is to figure out what life was like before so that we know where they want to go. So as we go through this, this may be your hero story, or you may have already become the mentor if you're successful in what you do. And there's nothing more powerful than telling your client story. And I'll tell you why, is because oftentimes as you progress into the expert, the mentor, the guru, the leader, what happens is your audience starts to feel some distance from you. And they see you as kind of a superhero. And it's oftentimes why you need your kryptonite. It's why if you follow comic books, every single superhero has some form of weakness that's shared. You have to make you more relatable. However, if you're the mentor and you have your clients, right, your clients are one step closer to the audience. So having your own story is very, very powerful. But then if you have transitioned to the mentor, also being able to tell the story of your clients are important. Now, you don't need those to get started. One story is enough. And that's what makes this so powerful. As Jason said, everybody can relate to this. This is a motif that runs through everybody's life, and every successful movie is running this. Once you see this complete, if you've never heard of this before today, once you see the complete journey, you'll never watch a movie the same. Actually, you'll probably never watch a TV show the same again. Or read a book, because you'll start to see this pattern. What happens is when people vary from this, and that's really when telling a story, when people vary from this, what happens is it leaves the audience confused. Because we're not used to that. So movies that have unexpected endings typically don't do well.
They're
because
risky.
It lets the audience down because we have an internal guide that wants to match up to this. So let's keep going. But you should be taking notes. Hopefully you have your stories. I'm looking here. It looks like we got a lot of yeses coming in. So that's great. And people are starting to connect the dots here.
The way the most profitable webinar I ever did was telling a customer story about a guy named Raul who was in a position where he had the call to adventure, and we'll get more into that as we go on. Crossing the threshold, okay? So there comes a no turning back point. So you, and this is what's so great, this works on two levels. You yourself have experienced this. So therefore, it's easy for you to share this with others, but others will resonate with you because most of them are waffling. You know the single worst word you could ever hear on a webinar? When you ask for the order, it's not no, it's maybe. More fortunes are lost by that dirty little 5-letter word, maybe, than any other word that exists. Because maybe is, I'm thinking about it, I might, right? I would rather get a no than a maybe any day of the week because I know where I stand. That's a decision, but maybe is an indecision. And so your audience, just like you, has sat there and looked at the edge and did not go in. And so you are creating relatability when you talk about your false starts. And then when you talk about the defining moment where you were in and you decided, let's go. That's when you leave the normal world and you venture into the unknown. Now, here's some sales psychology for you. The reason why people stay the same, even though it's painful, the reason that people put themselves in an unhealthy position and still accept it, or the reason that people stay broke and broken, or the reason that people stay in miserable, failed relationships is because at least they know what to expect. It's familiar, and there's comfort in that discomfort of familiarity. The unknown is the scariest thing that a human being can face, so they would rather suffer with the devil they know than try to change it. So you have to make it very enticing for them to want to take a risk to be anything other than what they currently are.
Absolutely. The best way to predict the future is just to look backwards because it's showing you your behaviors. And that's really, like, most people are unaware of their behaviors. And so when you can recognize those behaviors, you can make a change. However, this is why the meeting of the mentor is so important, because oftentimes it takes a third party. It takes someone outside of yourself to recognize what you're doing, because when you're so close to something, it's hard to see. It's why people hire consultants and coaches and things like that, because that person brings a different set of eyes to something that you've been looking at and obviously haven't moved forward on, just as your audience is doing when they come to you. It may be a simple solution, and to you it may be kindergarten stuff, but to them it's revolutionary. And that's important to understand. That's why every one of you has a story, because you've gone through something in your life and moved forward that has brought you to this live course today that obviously is powerful enough to share with someone else. You have something that you've already done. The crossing of the threshold, what's really interesting here is that a lot of people think meeting the mentor is where things begin to change. The crossing the threshold is when the person makes the commitment to themselves. There's many people, and I'm sure you have, I know I have, you've purchased a course, you've hired a coach, you've got all the information, you just never take action.
Right.
It's not because the information isn't good, it's not because the coach isn't effective, it's because you didn't make that commitment. And as Jason said, you're more comfortable where you are. Making a commitment to change is uncomfortable because you have to admit that my life isn't good, the things that I'm doing aren't working, and I have to change. And then you have to make the decision that no matter what, I'm going to stick to my guns. And here's the thing, we'll get into this next, the next phase. Crossing of the threshold is just the beginning. Once you cross the threshold, it gets harder. The decision to cross the threshold is the easy decision as you go through this. And this is what most people don't understand. Why this is so important to you. When you're having a sales conversation, or you're presenting a webinar and you follow this formula, you can point these things out to the audience. So as you're listening, you may be having some ahas, as we go through, be like, I've done this, I understand this. This is where I did this and refused the call. This is where I did this, hired the mentor, and moved forward. What was different there? What you'll realize is, what's next is the battle. And we get into that, and we get into the struggles. That is the lessons that you can share with your audience. So let's continue going.
Yeah, one thing to that is my goal in sales, and this should be your goal as well on a webinar, where you make not buying more costly than purchasing. If you can reach that point, you will sell the lights out. When the pain of not buying or the cost of inaction is greater than the cost of them giving you money. So just think about that. That's a little open loop for you, right? Trials and failures. People learn more from their failures than they do from their successes. this. My goal is always as a webinar presenter, and the more money I've made, the harder it is for me to make money on webinars. I know that's totally paradoxical. How is that to be? Because somebody says, oh, Jason's a $100 million webinar man. It's like, oh, he can do it. Of course he can do it, but I'm just starting out. I can't do it. And so if I talk about only my successes, then I become unrelatable. And I will lose to the guy who just made $1,000 yesterday on his first webinar. He will outsell me to the audience who's on step 1 of a 1,000-step journey, and I'm over there on step 999. And so your audience will relate better and be more eager to learn about your successes once they hear about your failures first, right? So one of the things I always tell my audiences with webinars is, I hope none of you ever find the first webinar I ever did in 2007. And I refuse to go and look for that, because it would be so embarrassing. It would make me sick to my stomach to see how bad that webinar was. I cannot even begin to confront that. Can't even think about it. But if I didn't do that first webinar, I couldn't have done the second webinar. If I didn't do the second webinar, I couldn't do the third webinar. So thank God I did that really, really, really bad webinar, because otherwise I would still be broke painting houses for $12 an hour, right? But I can fill up a list. Like when I talk and tell my stories, I say, listen, I do things, I am wrong more often than I'm right. And for everything that I get right, I get 1,000 things wrong. I'm only good at these 3 things at the expense of everything else in my life, right? The trials and failures, that's what's really compelling. Like, let me tell you some of my trials and failures and see if you can relate to this. And so I didn't get a license until I was 23 years old because I was afraid to drive. When I'd walk down the street, I'd see somebody walking the other way, and I would cross the street just so I didn't have to look them in the eyes, right? I didn't learn how to tie my shoes until I was 6 years old, okay? There's something wrong with my brain. It doesn't see things in the right light, which is awesome when it comes to finding insights to learn different systems to be successful online. So the very things that held me back early on, you got to think about it this way. The only reason I was able to learn how to sell the way that I did was because it was so much harder for me to even take the first step. So I had to prepare 100 times harder. What was natural for everybody else was unnatural for me. But once I learned it at the deepest level, I had a gift that I could give you that the normal person who was normal couldn't give you, because they didn't have to work so hard just to do the most basic stuff. And so your failures not only should be mentioned on your webinar, they should be highlighted and celebrated.
Absolutely. The thing with trials and failures that most people don't realize is that's actually the gold, because that's what's the most relatable to the audience, because they're probably going through things right now. I'll give you an example, one that's very common. You've lost a lot of weight in your career, over your lifespan.
I released it. I didn't lose it.
Yeah, you let it go. You let it go. After my powerlifting career, I was an all-time world record holder, but I was fat, sick, and nearly dead. I lost 100 pounds and stepped on the bodybuilding stage. Now, both of us have that experience. However, when you look at trials and failures, I almost guarantee that both of us could pick out diets that we tried that didn't work, exercise programs that we gave a shot that maybe injured us or caused problems. But in the end, we got to the outcome that we wanted. And that's really what's key here. When you're looking in your story and you're looking for your trials and failures, you want to look at, you may be on a hero's journey right now. I find that life is made up of one giant hero's journey and lots of little hero's journeys. And what you want to find is what's something that I overcame, and then look back and say, what were all the things that I tried and failed at to overcome that? It could be as simple, let's say, it comes to making money online. I started out with paid advertising, and I ran out of money. And then I did SEO, and Google decided to change all their algorithms, and I lost over 500 sites that were page 1 rankings overnight because I gamed the system. Yep. And so I continued down the line to try to figure out how to make money online. You may have that same story. And when you figure out, okay, I tried all these things, but this is what worked. It's that this is what worked. That is the outcome everybody is after, but it's here's what I learned along the way, which is the lessons that gets them to lean in and say, tell me more about your solution, because I've tried all those things. If you look at any good advertising that you see on Facebook or on Google, a lot of times what you'll see is, you'll learn X without doing Y.
Yep.
And a lot of the times they'll say without live video, without email, without social media, because in their journey, they tried all these things and failed.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that none of those things work. You know, we hear all the time the email is dead. Well, the latest research has shown email is actually the #1 way to build a relationship with an audience. It's the best connection you can have, not social media, you know, not any of, you know, the Facebooks, the Twitter, the Snapchat, the Instagram. No, email is still the best way to build an audience. However, how many times do you hear that? But for the person who's tried email and failed, they're going to resonate with that message, and they're going to lean in to learning from that author or that, you know, that educator, because to them it's more relevant to their life. And that's really what people are doing. People are connecting with other people that they feel are close to them, that they can learn from. And as we are all unique and all are different, that means that there is a group, an audience, and a tribe out there that will follow you, because your experience is unique to you, but it's not unique in the sense that nobody else has ever gone through those things. And that's what makes the internet so powerful now. Is before, you could only do this in your local city, you know, or by traveling.
Yep.
Now you can reach a worldwide audience with your story, and you'll find a person from all different places of the planet who connects with what you've gone through, because they may be going through that right now.
You are already a hero to somebody. You just haven't found them yet. There's something you've already accomplished that there's a lot of people all over the world who would kill to be able to get just some of what you already know. But to you, you discount it because it's so commonplace for you. Now, you know, speaking from a stage is an effective way to do it. But if you want to put those unique people in the room, you'd be speaking to them 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. But online, we could reach them. Oh, you know, they're from some remote place of the earth that a human hasn't laid eyes on in the last 50 years outside of this little small nomadic group of people. We could probably target them and reach them as long as they have an internet. So your trials and failures, though, is what makes the validity of your claims true. If you only talk about the good stuff, people will not believe you. If you talk about the bad stuff and then say, but this is the one good thing, then they believe you. Growth in new skills. So this is what sets this up, is then they'll say, I can see why you finally succeeded. I can understand now how you acquired the new skills. Because when people don't buy from you is when they don't believe what you teach is something that they can do. So you ever heard the phrase, and I've heard it a million times, I did this, so you can do this as well, right? It's like, if I can do this, anybody can do this. That's the punchline. They start with that, and that's almost always wrong. It's so natural to say, well, if I did it, anybody can do that, and that's true. But if you start with the punchline to the joke, you're not going to get any laughs, right? So if you start with the punchline to your story, you lose before you even start to play the game. And so only when you say, this is how I figured this out, after you show the things that didn't work, that's when people say, now it makes sense how Edison invented the light bulb. He ran out of ways not to do it. Now I get it. When somebody sees, okay, the growth was earned, then they believe, well, I can earn that growth. When before you just show them the outcome, they say, that's either, I don't think it's possible, I think you're lying to me, or I think you did it, but I can't do it. Because you jumped right to the end of the story. But if the setup is there where they say, oh, well, yeah, I earned that. I can earn that path the way that he does. And the way we always position it on webinars is we always say, pioneers come home full of arrows, right? I was your pioneer. So you don't have to go down the dead ends I went down. You don't have to get beaten, bloodied, and bruised, right? You don't have to learn how to create fire from scratch by rubbing 2 sticks together. I already figured all that stuff out, right? So doesn't it make sense to have a tour guide as you walk through the jungle, as opposed to go in there with a blindfold? You say, Jason, I want some of those coaches. We will get to those, okay? By the time we're done, the offer will be set up so closing becomes second nature to you. More important for you to understand now is this is how we get the growth and then new skills. AJ didn't go from one day just powerlifting, the next day expert, guru, genius, internet marketer. It didn't happen that way, right? He was understanding through his mentor and through his trials and errors what worked and what didn't work. And the conclusion is he got rid of the stuff that didn't work, and now he's giving it to you on a silver platter what does work. And that's just to get really metaphysical here for a second, that's a death and a rebirth. If you want to do well on webinars, you want to destroy that old identity of that person and replace it with a new, more empowered individual, right? So the example I always give is this. The example is, why should somebody believe they can succeed when they've tried the thing that you're teaching them 117 times and they failed all 117 times, right? No wonder why their friends say quit. No wonder why their parents or their children say, oh my God, not another get-rich-quick scheme, or not another diet fad, or not another whatever, right? Because logically that makes sense. It should not be any different the 118th time that they try something if they failed 117 times before that. And I get that, right? But here's the beautiful thing about this. You are the one willing to take a risk on them to say this time might be different. And there's a part of them, a small part probably. A large part of them says, yeah, I probably can't do this. But there's that small part of them that hopes that they can do this. But we have to destroy that old identity that they have of a failure. And we have to replace that with the identity of somebody who can succeed. Now, we can tell them and we can try to teach them how to do this, or we can show them via our story. And then they can say, ah, I am now seeing myself in a future tense, as opposed to seeing myself from a past tense. When they show up to your webinar in the present, they're typically looking at it from the perspective of the past, and that's not empowering. If we can get them to look back at their problem from the future, that's the difference. And so that's where your story shows up and does that. And, you know, really, that's when the revelation occurs. That's when you drill it down. Here's a study for you to make. No matter what you do, this is a universal law, there's only a few things that matter at the end of the day. They call this the 80-20 rule, right? So few inputs equal a majority of the outputs. When I'm on a webinar and I'm selling, there's like 3 things that I ultimately have to do at the end of the day to make 90% of the profits. There are, in any situation, just a couple of things that matter the most. I'm sure in powerlifting, AJ, it's not the 117 things that you do to make a difference. It's probably a couple things that make a majority of the difference, right? Yep. And so the revelation is when we reveal that on the webinar. This is when we can get more into the message. The revelation is this is the one thing that makes the most difference. This is the one thing that can provide and get you traction where you were stuck. This is the aha moment. So you'll hear me talk about this a lot. Our goal on every webinar is to achieve the following. We want somebody to say, you know what, Jason, I've listened to 15 speakers on this topic, speak for 15 hours over the last 15 years, and in 15 minutes, you have given me more insight into my problem than all the rest combined. That's the aha moment. Now, people think you have to be some sort of genius to do that. Well, if that were the case, I would be disqualified, right? You do not. It's a structure. And this story has that in the structure when somebody says, ah, now I can see why this time can be different. Ah, now I get it. That's the revelation, or the revelation. Finally changes. So everybody sells the change at the beginning of the webinar. They show you the end result, right? That's the mistake. No wonder why people say webinars don't work anymore. No, the model you're using doesn't work anymore, nor did it ever work to begin with. Yeah, maybe you got lucky. You know, a blind squirrel can find a nut and a broken clock's right twice a day. But this is the aha moment, the finally changes. This is when you reveal those big insights and they buy in and say, I can do this as well. Atonement. It's hidden in plain sight why we're successful. And sometimes I think we take for granted why we're successful because it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar, right? But when we step back and look at these structures, it starts to make sense. This is how you go back and right the wrongs that you made along the way. This is where you pay for your sins. And this sets you up, by the way, to sell the offer. You're atoning for your own mistakes and misdeeds along the way by not allowing somebody else to make the same mistakes that you made. That's atonement from my perspective. It's not the same atonement that they teach to write screenplays and stories and scripts and stuff like that, because that is selling you on the character and liking the character. We're ultimately selling a product, a service, a software, a physical good, a digital good. But this is where you give back. This is where you make right the things that you screwed up and the mistakes that you made along the way. Because people, they will cheer for you and support you morally and financially once you come clean. And that's when you set up the offer. And now you have the offer. You give the gift, which is the next step. This is when you give them the solution. This is when you make it an opportunity. See, a lot of people, when they look at selling something online, they look at it as something they're doing to someone. Selling is not something you do to someone. Selling is something you do for someone. So the worst thing you can do is have something that can change somebody's life and hold it back from them. That is the biggest tragedy. Is the idea here is no single person ever says, oh my God, I was held down on a webinar. They reached to the screen, they handcuffed me, and they forced me to take my wallet out and pay for this product. That has never happened yet. I'm working on technology to figure out how to do that, right? Because my life would be a lot easier if I could do that. I can't do that. You can't do that, right? The buyer has all the power. The buyer has all the control in the situation. That buyer can leave anytime that they want to. Unlike a live seminar where there's at least courteous, they don't want to get up to interrupt the speaker. A webinar, they could be watching that in their underwear, and they could just throw the tablet halfway across the room if they want to quit. They don't have to try. And so we are giving them the gift to have a choice. If we don't sell them something, we don't give them a choice where they can go alone or they can go with us. So not selling them is giving them no choice. Selling them is giving them a choice. That is your gift. So that is the big reveal of the offer. This is your gift. And now you have return changed. This is you now selling from the position of you are now the hero to this audience. And you truly are if you've done everything that we've discussed and talked about. And you have come back. You have return change. You have come back to where you once started. But now you see the world through a different set of eyes, an empowered set, and now you can empower others. This one story, forget the techniques, forget the tactics, forget the structure, forget tonality, right? Forget webinar length. Although those are little details that might make a little amount of difference, but this one story structure within it is the whole framework that you would ever need to sell from a webinar. And my question to you is, how many webinars do you get on that have this power or even a little bit of this power in it? And I bet the answer is not very many, right? Well, that's why they don't deserve the money from webinars that you could be making if you show up like this.
And you know, the big mistake people make is they don't understand that you probably, like I said earlier, your life is one big hero's journey and then multiple hero's journeys within. And what happens is that we have one of these stories. And then what happens, you return to normal and you're good for a while. And then there's another call to adventure and you set out. And so right now, you're on some form of hero's journey. And my guess is that you're in the trials and failures phase, right? And that you're struggling. And maybe you're getting to that growth in new skills, but oftentimes there's a new challenge that arises. So for example, with diets, you go on the keto diet, you lose weight. And then you decide to add carbs back in, you gain the weight back, and then you try a different diet. Maybe you try the carnivore diet. You experience diarrhea like Joe Rogan just shared on his carnivore diet. And so you say, that's not for me either. And then you gain some weight back because you go back to regular eating. And then you try another diet. And so oftentimes, because we are in the hero's journey, we forget about the ones that we've completed. And we never share that gift to the world. We never share that message. And if you look at anybody who is successful, who is a leader, they have their, core stories or their origin stories or the stories that you hear them tell over and over and over again. And the reason for that is that's their hero's journey that they've completed, they've extracted the lessons from, they've put together the course or the product or the service, and that's what they're offering to the world. They don't share what they're currently going through. And the reason for that is there's no lesson there in it for you. Right? You're just witnessing what's going on right now in their life. And so you may be experiencing that too. So I don't want you to, undervalue the hero's journeys you've gone on, because it may seem to you like it wasn't very much or that you learned something, but other people are teaching it. But to the right person, that could change their life. You never know the ripple effect it's going to cause. You change their life, you change their children's life, you change their entire lineage. There's no value you can put on that. So sharing that gift, that's what's really, really important. So as we've gone through this and we sped it up a little bit for time's sake so that we can get through everything, because we do have an incredible amount of content for you today, hopefully you can see, yes, I have at least one of these. Yeah. Now, one of the questions we had come in is, how would you tell the story from the mentor's position? And really the only difference is that you are now talking about the client. So as the mentor, you're essentially saying, Susie Q came to me and wanted to do this. So she had tried that. It didn't work. We started doing this. Here are the challenges she's faced. Here's how we overcame those challenges. And, and here's what she was able to do after. And now you can get that same result because I put together this program. And we'll talk about offer creation here in a little bit, but that's really the only difference.
So let me break down Raul's story, right? So this is the story, Raul, very succinctly told. It's way better on the actual webinar. But see, Raul came to us through a local meetup in Santa Clarita, which is a small, valley and outside of LA. And we were selling this opportunity to start an Amazon business. And Raul was on his last leg. In fact, Raul kept the credit card in his car because him and his wife had agreed that he was no longer going to buy any of these get-rich-quick schemes online ever again without her permission. But then he went out and got the credit card and bought from us. And the problem was he had let his wife down. And he actually felt like he had disappointed her and wasn't being the husband that he should have been because he had tried all these things and she put up with them and he'd failed one after the other. So here's where Raul finds himself. He's a full-time nurse, so he works more than 40 hours a week. He's a part-time student going back to school to get his degree. He's a father of 4. He's active in his local church and his community, and he's also dead broke. And every single thing that he's tried to do has harmed his family from a financial side of things, hasn't helped. And so here Raul finds himself in a weird position where he's betrayed his wife, but he believes in this opportunity. And so she says to him, okay, if you're going to do this, here's the agreement. This is the last thing you're ever going to do. If it doesn't work, you'll give up your dream of being an entrepreneur. And he says, okay. And she says, second thing, forget the pie in the sky, dreams of millions of dollars. I just want you to make $500 a month. That's your goal. And so he says, okay, I'm going to do that. And so he took the system that we taught and he completely flipped it on its head to go for the $500 wins. And then when I discovered his story, because he became very successful, I interviewed him and I said, oh, I think Raul has a better approach than any other approach, including anyone I've ever taught you. Because the way he does it, I don't see how you can fail. Everybody else is teaching this home run hitting strategies. And yeah, they're flashy. And yeah, they might move more units if I'm teaching you $50,000 a month and this and that, right? But the $500 a month approach, I think, has more certainty of success than anything. So here's what Raul taught me. And then I teach that on the webinar from the perspective and I tell his story. And so the best thing you can do it is when you're, the best way you can learn anything is by teaching it. See, I always feel selfish when I do this kind of stuff, AJ, because I'm getting the better end of the deal. I learn more about webinars by teaching it. So whatever subject you're passionate about, you will learn more if you teach it, which is awesome. And so I take the position of here's what my students taught me, or here's what I learned when I was trying to help somebody else. And so this puts that person, that prospect, in the position of they want to be the next Raul. They want to be the next insert whoever it was that was successful. And the littler successes actually do better than the bigger successes. Who can relate to $1 million a year? Not very many people. Who can relate to $500 extra money per month? Well, a lot of Uber drivers can, but you don't have to drive Uber anymore to get that extra $500. And it's even more than $500 if you do it right. Take your small wins. Those are what you want to blow up and magnify, because people don't want to know the 1,000 steps of the journey. They want to know the one step to move one step closer than what they are now. So you give them the first step for free, and then if they want to continue the journey with you, they can pay for it. But here's the thing. We could analyze this till we're blue in the face, right? And that's the tendency that most of you have. You say, well, what about this? And what about that, Jason? And I'm not quite sure when I cross the threshold and how much time should we spend on each one of these steps and all that. You've lost it, okay? You are out of your heart because you're into your head now. Throw that out. Just understand the underlying structure. The best way you can help somebody is for them to see themselves doing what you just did. Then you are a hero to them. So there are people that you can be a hero to if you just tell the story. So follow the basic structure here to tell the story, and then you'll wonder why you ever had trouble selling something to anybody before, because it's not the tactics so much that matter. It matters a little bit. It's this resonation. Like, here's the thing. I make more money using slide decks when I sell on webinars than I ever do straight to video. Even though I would want to do video, and I love doing video. I love that we're in this video studio right now, but this is a full-on crew, right? This is no joke. I mean, I am surrounded. I feel famous right now being in the studio, right? 90% of the time, it's me and this ugly laptop that I haven't washed in 6 months with a PowerPoint presentation deck. And somebody says, Jason, why don't you go straight to camera? Because don't you get rapport that way with somebody? And I said, granted, but if my only way I get rapport is showing up and looking into a camera, that has to be the least effective way to gain rapport. I say, I put the focus in the information. I put the focus on the slide deck so they don't look at me, they look at the story. And now I get more rapport by doing that. And buy-in to my story leads to buying of my product. And so that's what you should consider as well. You don't have to show yourself when you tell the story. Let the story be the star, not you. But people will resonate with that story. You don't even have to be on camera if you don't want to be. Of course, if you like to be on camera, if you think that'll put you in a better state, by all means, go for it. On camera, off camera, doesn't matter. Tell the story. Tell it from a perspective where somebody can step into it. And then when they see it, they'll believe it. No, they won't. It's the other way around. When they believe it, then they can finally see it. And that's the difference between most people who say, oh, I don't want to do webinars versus those that are saying, like, why doesn't everybody do webinars?
Yeah. Well, and buying is really an emotional experience. You know, no matter what facts you put in front of someone, no matter, you know, how logical it is, if they don't emotionally experience and feel that there's going to be change, they'll never buy into the process. And that's why you can take a script, or you can take, you know, one of these blueprints. And we've given, you know, we give away our $4 million blueprint. Yeah. And it's a fantastic starting point. But if you don't understand the story, the hero's journey and the story and the ability to tell the story, you know, filling out blank worksheets or, you know, entering words into a script, that leaves you with logic. It doesn't leave you with emotion. And that's really the difference when you see people who sell very, very well, you know, via webinars or from stage or anywhere, any great salesman, they get you emotional. And it's the emotion that allows them to see that the transformation can take place. It's not manipulation. It's not, you know, taking someone and getting them to do something they don't want to do. It's getting them to lower their guard. Because you have to remember, all of us have the flight, or freeze response. And it's in every situation. It's why when someone walks up to you when you're looking, you go into a store to look for a new pair of shoes, and someone comes up to you and says, do you need any help? Yeah. And you say, no, thanks. I'm just browsing. You're in there to buy a new pair of shoes, but that very feeling that someone is going to try to sell you something, the walls go up. And so all we're trying to do is get someone to relax, to resonate and connect with us. And it doesn't take time to do. As soon as they realize, wait a minute, this person's gone through what I'm going through, their guard comes down, and now they actually hear you on a different level. It's not just conscious, it's subconscious. And when those two combine, it makes moving forward in their journey with you that much easier. So there's only a couple of questions that have come in. If you have questions, feel free to write them in. The team's putting them in here. One of the questions that came in is, what's the best way to grow an email list? And I'm laughing.
Do a webinar.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. A couple of questions came in around, why not just use social media to do live videos? And you know, one of the things, you know, we mentioned earlier.
I love this question, by the way.
If you're, you know, if someone is scrolling and they see a live video, the chances of them stopping and attending the full training is slim to none, right? And so it becomes difficult. Now, you know, if you make a video and it has a call to action, what we've seen, and we've seen done very effectively, is people using live video to drive their audience to a webinar. That then builds their list. Now, on that webinar, they can teach and transact, you know, and make money from the webinar, or it can be a webinar presentation that leads to the next thing. And that's really what we're doing, is moving our audience along the buying journey. And so webinars, you know, people come to learn. I think you'll agree the content is phenomenal that we're doing today, and that's why we haven't, you know, everybody who's joined is still here, and that's what's so important. Again, it's not about the social media not being effective. Right. It's about, you know, where do you go live if you do social media? Do you go live on Facebook? Do you go live on Instagram? Do you go live on YouTube? You know, there's other platforms. Where do you go live? How do you go live on all of them? It starts to create problems. And I've seen certain guys, they got like 8 cell phones, you know, to be able to go live. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what you're doing is now you're trying to interact with people all over the place versus bringing them to one place, one central place where you can have one clear message, one clear goal, and then move them to that next thing.
So here's the thing. Most of you do not have the complete best version of you, right? So here's what I mean by that. You don't have your I have a dream speech captured live, right? So if you think of that Martin Luther King Jr. speech, that's probably him at his very best. And it's documented and it's there in its entirety for the world to see. Most of us do not have the best version of ourselves present. We have a lot of kind of good versions of us, right? So if I'm on that day and I had my coffee and the kids weren't screaming and yelling before school, I might be in state and I might do okay, right? And then I have my not so good days where no matter what I do, everything goes wrong. Like for some reason, we got really lucky today and the drilling stopped the moment we went live. But we were ready to go in with some dude with some gigantic drill next door tearing down the walls, right? It is what it is. But if you believe that you owe it to your customers to give a superior experience, which is the only way to maximize profit, by the way, then you should have you captured at your very best somewhere. Nobody typically does that, though, because it either intimidates them or they don't think they're worthy. Maybe you don't think you're worthy. Well, I say think again, because you are the most worthy person that I know, because you're a human being and you're full of potential. And so you should capture yourself at the very best. So if you're using other stuff, which you should, where do you send them to, as AJ was saying? You have to have some destination where you could say, I have me at my very best somewhere. And that's, to me, is the webinar. And the webinar, to me, that is me at my very best. Now, I'm also going to put feelers out there. I'm going to have many doors that you could open that lead to me. But once you open those doors, what do you get when you get me? That's where your webinar should live. So if any of that other stuff is working, put a webinar on it and it's gasoline to a fire. By the way, if none of that other stuff you can make to work, put the webinar in first and then build the other stuff around it. So to answer the first question is, what's the best way to build an email list? A webinar, to me, is the best way because people don't look at it as a shakedown. They don't say, well, that person's squeezing. You ever heard the term squeeze page, right? Nobody thinks about where that comes from. Where does the term squeeze page? Well, it came from a marketer who thought, if I squeeze somebody hard enough, their email address will fall out to my database, right? That's the theory behind it, right? That already presupposes a negative aspect of a relationship with a customer. I think that's a horrible way to look at it as a squeeze page. I use the word sometimes because you know what it is, but I don't like that word. But a webinar registration page, they are registering for something. They're going to attend something. And oh, by the way, of course, they also go on an email list. Should, of course they should, right? But they don't look at it as like I was squeezed onto an email list. They look at it as I was invited to be part of something. And that's a whole different type of relationship. So that webinar, even if it doesn't work, number one goal of a webinar is to leave somebody better off than they were before the webinar started. Whether they buy from you that day or not, you just won because you increase the chances of them doing business with you in the future. They say, wow, if he does another webinar, I'd like to come to that. If you get them to do only that, even if they don't buy, it's only a matter of time before you strike pay dirt because they will keep showing up. And eventually, you will run out of ways not to sell them. And then you will sell them by attrition, if no other method, right? I mean, I like skill. I like to work smart, not hard. But I also work hard. So I work smart and I work hard because I take what I do seriously. And so should you. And so the webinar is you taking your business seriously. Otherwise, what are you doing this for? Is this a hobby? Or is this something that makes the difference in somebody else's life? Now, side note, if you want to learn how to use emotion, because people buy emotionally, go back and run that back again and see how I was able to use emotion to get you into a state of acceptance.
Yeah. So a question from Dave, and I just want to answer this quick, and we'll try to go through these, is, what type of content on social media then gets someone to go through to a webinar? And one of the best things I ever heard was that content that makes people aware of the problem. So let's say we were going to do a webinar on successful email marketing. We keep talking about building lists. Let's say we're going to do a webinar on successful email marketing. Well, we know some of the problems people have, and it may be getting in the primary inbox. And so your social media content could be, 3 reasons why you're not getting to the primary inbox. But it doesn't tell the person how to fix that. You share those 3 reasons, and then you say, and if you want to know how to fix this, I'm hosting a webinar, and we're going to go through the, whatever number, the 5 things that guarantee that you get into that inbox. Those are the kind of content you put on social media that makes people aware of the problem, that then they desire the solution, and the webinar is going to provide that solution. That is the kind of content I've seen work best, and that should give you enough to go off of. Another question we had come in.
Hold on a second. I'm going to break this out.
Oh, good.
We're going to go on the tablet here, right? Because I'm going to draw this out because I think this is really insightful somebody. So Sassy, can we throw this up on the screen up here? And then I'll see if I can get this thing to draw. Oh, I did it. Wow. Technology. Is it upside down?
Yeah, just lift it up. So like the screen changes orientation. No, flip it the other way.
Thank you. Just go this way.
Oh, sweet. That was cool. Okay, so let's just say this is your person here, right? This is who you want to market to. And so the question was exactly, what was it again, AJ?
Best type of social media content to use to then get people to go to the webinar and register.
Okay, so let's just say this is the webinar over here, all right? So this is the webinar that we want them to go to. And I hit the erase button, I think here. All right, we'll get it. Okay, so in order to get them to that webinar, how do we send them? What do we put in between that? This is always the great question, right? How do we get them to go to the webinar? And so I don't know. You don't know. Anybody who's honest with themselves does not know. We have no clue. But unlike direct mail, unlike Super Bowl advertising, unlike everything else, we have an unlimited amount of chances to essentially for free or for little cost to find out. And so we take appeal number 1. We see what happens. Did that work? Appeal number 2, does that work? Appeal number 3, does that work? Appeal number 4, does that work? Appeal number 5. I don't want to be right. I just want to accelerate the data, all right? I don't care which one of these 7 work. I might have my own personal pet theory of which one I think should work or might work, right? And then we find out that this appeal was a dud. So all these red ones, they're duds, right? They sucked, okay? The blue appeal, this did okay, right? All right, so, and then we find out this magical unicorn color one. I think this was the winner right here. Like, ooh, right? Look at that. That's the winner. So here's now what we do, okay? We take number 4 and we break that out, all right? So now this becomes the thing that sends them to the webinar, whatever this appeal was. So if we were like email marketing, okay, what are all the different things that we could do? That could be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. Number 1 could be like, what's the technology? If I want to build an email list, what platform should I use? Maybe that will grab. Maybe it won't. I don't know. I'm going to find out, though. We're going to put it in front of people and see how they respond. Another one might be lead magnets, the power of lead magnets to build your email list. Another one is how to write proper emails, right? I do not know, and I've been doing this longer than most, and I've sold more than most, right? I don't know what's going to work. I don't care. We're going to jam them all out. So number 4, whatever that appeal was out of the 7 appeals we tested, that's what worked. Okay, cool. So now we can run this out on social media, get this as the engagement hook, and get this on the webinar. Okay, but does it have to just be social media? Absolutely freaking not. This becomes the email that we use. This is what we do when we send this out to affiliates. This becomes a front-end product because the best person to put on a webinar is somebody who's just spent a small amount of money with you. So sell a low-ticket product and then invite them to a webinar to sell them the best version of the product, right? This becomes your whole new groundwork for business in which you can generate from. And so we don't need to know the answer. And in fact, trying to think of the answer is a waste of time and resources. Here's something I want to urge each and every one of you. Okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, we don't want to overthink. Okay, I want each and every single one of you to start underthinking. That's what you need to do. Underthink the problem. Underthink the solution. Underthink everything. Because while you're thinking, I'm putting things in front of people and seeing how they respond. Because I have no ego tied up in the answer. If I'm wrong 6 times and I'm right the 7th time, and I didn't have to spend any time, money, or effort to find out that, please let me be wrong more often. If I can accelerate how often I'm wrong and make more money doing it, I never want to be right again in my life, right? There is no right or wrong. I know that you're taught and you live in a world where brain surgery is your approach. where 1 millimeter might kill somebody, and you take that attitude, like you're engineering a bridge, right? One ball out of place and the whole thing falls apart. And there are instances where that is true. And there are applications where that approach makes sense. The creative solution providing that you're bringing to the marketplace is not one of those places. Okay? This is where you have the luxury of being wrong. In fact, some of my best campaigns is when I went back to my audience and say, wow, I really screwed the pooch on that one. I thought you wanted to know about X, but it was abundantly obvious to me 5 minutes in and for the next 59 minutes that you cared not one lick about X. You wanted to know why. And I said, okay, what can I do here? What I can do is eat crow, come back to you and throw out the old script and give me a second chance. If you're willing to come back on this new webinar that I just wrote, that I stayed up all night fixing, because clearly I missed the boat on that last one. If you'll give me the second chance, I would like to make it up for you. Guess what? Pretty soon you're going to start thinking, how can we intentionally screw up so we can make it up to people? Because that's more effective than getting it right the first time. So forget about getting it right. Get it going and then get it right. That's the solution.
And that's the beauty with social media is speed. Right? The difference between a webinar and social media is webinar, if you're putting slides together, if you're, you got a product you're selling, you're putting time into it. With social media, you can test. It's gone within 24 hours on most platforms. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions quick because we got to get back to the content, but I don't want to ignore these questions as they are about what we've just delivered. So one of the questions is examples of call to adventures. And typically what you'll find is the call to adventure is that moment they realize it's the jumping off point. What made them go from where they were to where they want to go? So, what takes someone who is sitting on the couch to suddenly going to the gym? What makes someone who is, struggling to pay their bills and working a 9 to 5 decide to be an entrepreneur?
Yep.
Like, it's whatever that cause of that decision was. And so any webinar you watch, pretty much any presentation you watch, every TED Talk you watch, there is typically a moment where they share, how did they get to where they are? And what was that first spark? And if you think about it, it's the first spark. It was funny you mentioned, how it was 17 years after the first spark. When I go back and think, what was my first thing? I was actually watching MTV Cribs. And I was an athlete at the time. And I watched MTV Cribs and I saw these and I said, I'm going to be a professional athlete one day. I happened to pick a sport that didn't have money in it. So even though it became the very, very best, I still have to work for a living. But the truth is that MTV Cribs set the mindset up because I saw something I'd never seen before. I'd never seen homes like that. I'd never seen cars like that. That was the original call to adventure. And it wasn't until later that I began to do that. So you'll have many, and that's what you should sit and think about is just, how many times in my life have I had a spark, had inspiration, and then taken action on it? Because that's the story you're going to be able to share. So that was a great question.
Yeah, go far back to the beginning too, because a lot of people mistake the crossing the threshold. When I got fired, that's when I decided to take it in my hand. That's not your call to adventure, okay? That's the crossing of the threshold. Your call to adventure became the day when you felt like you could achieve something that most people don't think they could achieve, or that day you decided you'd be open to an opportunity to take a risk for that most people are not willing to take a risk for. There's a reason why more people are employees than employers, because it's not natural to break that mold. But you are the one that broke that mold in whatever you do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ginger asks, how long should the story take in relation to the webinar? And we mentioned earlier, really as long as it is needed. As you look at this and you go through, the thing that's probably going to take the longest to tell is the trials and failures, because those are the lessons. So oftentimes you'll see, the 3 shifts you're going to learn on this webinar, or the 5 keys. That is the trials and tribulations. That is the point that probably takes up the bulk of it. But overall, the story that fits into the webinar, really it's going to probably be at least half of that webinar. You add on the front, the typical introduction, here's what you're going to learn, that kind of thing, and then the close at the end. Probably, for most people, the story is going to take around 30 minutes, if not a little bit longer. But again, don't stress too much about the length of the story.
Right.
Stress about conveying the story and what the lessons were. That's where the audience connects with you. And if you only need a short amount of time, there's nothing wrong with that. TED Talks, one of the most powerful presentations in the world, are typically around 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to any conference and the majority of presentations are an hour. What's the difference? The difference is just the amount of content they're sharing, or the stories they're telling. And so don't try to fit a mold that causes stress and undue worry.
Yep.
Tell the story how you are. And what you'll find is as you do this more often, just like a comedian who is constantly refining jokes, you'll find what works best, if there's a better way to tell it, if you need to cut stuff out, was it necessary? Because you can see that based on, you know, the feedback from the users.
So my first thing is always this: if I only had 5 minutes to tell the story, how would I tell it? And then after I figure out the 5-minute version, I say, well, if I had 10 minutes, what would it look like? And then if I had 20 minutes. So start with that constraint. If I only had 5 minutes to tell the story, what would I say? And then work backwards from there. So try to tell it with the bare minimum details and then fill in the color, and that's going to work for you very well. My goal for you is to tell it with the least amount of time possible. Most of you will prepare a webinar, if you've never done this before, that you think is 30 minutes long, and then it will actually be 90 minutes long. You are a poor judge of length. So I intentionally tell you to make it as short as possible, because what you think is short isn't short. And then you realize, oh, it's hard to change somebody's life in 5 minutes. That's why a webinar is an hour long, because we're trying to undo all this negative programming for the last 12 years, and we can't do that in 12 minutes, you know?
Absolutely. So Nancy asked, are we going to cover the software to use and how to get the training? Absolutely. That's coming on day 3.
Yeah,
so
I'm looking forward to that.
There's, you know, day 3, we'll share with you the software to use, what we use. Obviously, you can see part of WebinarJam, but we'll go through all of that on day 3. And we do have a special offer for those of you who don't have a platform or the ability to do that, and we'll share that with you then. But you know, this is purely designed to be content-based here, and is a real course. It's not a setup, so to speak. So you'll notice, hopefully, that the content we're delivering is designed to help you right now, regardless of whether you decide to use the software we recommend or not. So
yeah, now if you do use the software we recommend, it's a lot easier than how it was done back in my day. So I feel like an old man saying that, right?
Yeah. And then there's a couple of questions coming in here around traffic and audience and things like that.
Ooh, day 2.
That's day 2. So tomorrow, that's what we're going to be going over is audiences, your own audiences, other people audiences, and even cold traffic. Jason has some killer tips on how to use, how to drive cold traffic to webinars and get the highest conversions, so that you're not just throwing your money away. Because I think that's probably, if you've driven traffic before, a lot of you have probably experienced it's expensive, and obviously you want a return on investment with that. So that's day 2. Day 3, we get into growth and scale, and where we go over all of the technology that's going to help you do that, so that you can be as successful as possible, and hopefully get to the point where you are on the beach sipping margaritas and watching the sunset. So let's dive back into what we have today.
All right, let's jam.
We have a few more things on story, and then we're going to get into the offer, because obviously the offer is ultimately, when it comes to the webinar, you want to close strong, and we want to give you everything you need so that you can take someone and get them to take that next step, whether it's purchasing a product, which is our favorite thing to do, because it allows you to have the biggest impact on the person, or if it's just moving them to the next phase. So let's dive back in, because we do have some amazing content for you.
So the one thing I can tell you when it comes to your story, and within your story, your message, is this one axiom that everybody seems to miss: is meet your audience where they're at before you take them to where they want to go. So most of you who are subject matter experts, who have already achieved the gold medal at that thing that you want to help other people with, you live in a life of prosperity and a life of abundance, right? Now that I've become self-made, multimillionaire, blah, 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 right? My life and my daily struggles are a lot different than they were 12 years ago. So the story that I tell for that is, when I started my business, my living room was my bedroom, was my office. And it was big enough to either put a desk in or a bed in. So I slept on the floor, right? Because I would rather have a work desk than a bed. And that's where I started my journey. It's hard for me to remember that. Now my annoyances are, oh, the maid's 5 minutes late. What should I do with my life, kind of stuff, My challenges these days are a lot different than they were. So it's hard for me to meet my audience where they are, because I forget what that pain is like. I forget what it's like to decide how many times a month we can go out to eat, because we can only afford to go out to eat so many times a month. And so you have to go back to the pain. Your audience typically comes to webinars because they're in pain. Nobody goes to the psychiatrist and says, hey, listen, I'm a 9 out of 10 on the happiness scale. Give me that extra 1. to get to 10 out of 10. No, they go to a psychiatrist because they're suicidal, they're depressed, they can barely get out of bed in the morning. And that's the people that more often than not are on your webinars. So this is very important. You have to start with the pain before you can lead to the gain. So in that story structure, that's your message. Now, when it comes to content, by the way, because some of you, your story, depending on your price point, your audience, your offer will be longer. And some of you, the story will be shorter. Some of you constrained is, hey, I only got 4 hours to do this, so my audience is waiting for me. So this is the length, whatever it is, right? So some of you will have more content in terms of how to do this or how you achieve this or how this thing was successful. So let me give you some tips on this. Singular focus typically works the best. One thing. It's easy to be the world's best at something if you niche it down enough, right? So if you climb Mount Everest, you probably aren't the first person to ever do so, but you might be the first person born in Tupelo, Mississippi with a doctorate in this type of medicine who is over the age of 40 but under the age of 50, and you're the only one in the world who's ever done that. That's your claim to fame, right? So when you get on webinars, the best webinars you can do is really niching it down, really, really specifically. You say, how specific, Jason? I'm telling you, you can't get specific enough. So I could teach you all about email marketing, or I could teach you how to write a subject line. And the whole webinar could be about that. I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, a subject line will win, because who's the subject line expert who builds a whole webinar around that? Nobody. So you're the best in the world, even if you're the only one in the world. So a singular focus is where you can really help and impact people, and then they'll want to buy the rest of your stuff. When they launch an album, they don't give away the whole album. They play the radio-friendly song. The one song leads to the whole album. I know it's a dated example, but hopefully it makes sense. Paradigm-shifting information. So I always think about not what do I inform them with? What do I teach them that will give them the aha moment? So when you're going through your webinar, create your webinar, don't worry about it, and then go back and look at the content and say, is there any point in time where somebody would say, aha, that's the difference. Aha, that's where I've been going wrong. Or aha, now I can do something I couldn't do before. If you don't have an aha moment, your chances of your webinar working are going to be drastically reduced. So I bet you some of you have had aha moments already today. And if you have, go ahead and let me know in the chat box, right? Now think about how you were delivered that aha moment within the seeds of how I gave you an aha moment, or how AJ might have given you an aha moment, or how both of us together gave you an aha moment, right? That's a structure, just like the story is a structure. You can engineer paradigm shifts. You can engineer that aha. So you have to have an insight that's aha worthy. Doesn't have to be a big insight. Sometimes the simplest insights are the greatest insights. But you have to look through your webinar and say, is there a moment where my audience can say, aha? Because when somebody has a paradigm shift, that's when they say, I want more of that, and I will pay this person to be around them to receive more of that. So information without transformation equals masturbation. That's my saying, right? I could inform you till you're blue in the face, and I will not have served you. I will have given you a disservice. If I overwhelm you and leave you more confused than you were before we begun, I shouldn't have done the webinar. So a lot of people teach, and then they wonder why their customers are worse off as a result, because they didn't get the aha.
I think so many people think they have to give as much as possible, right? Because usually anybody who is presenting is at the core a teacher. And what makes people a great teacher, or what I like to call learning leaders, what makes learning leaders so good is they're always learning. Yeah. And so they never feel like you know enough. And so if you're in that position where you're like, I don't know what to choose, I don't know what topic to pick, you've probably been frustrated by people you see teach something and you say, well, I know that. How are they doing so well when they're not teaching all this other stuff? It's because people go to specialists. Yep. And we see this, if you look at anything in the world, we continue to go down to the simplest thing. Take the grocery store. This is an example everybody can relate to. You can get your lettuce chopped up already for you now. You don't even have to chop your own lettuce, because they've realized that people want, things done in the simplest form. And so that's what creates the path forward. And so you see this, if you have a hand injury, you go to a hand specialist. Most GPs could tell you what's wrong with your hand, but we don't think about that. We think about the specialist. We want the person whose experience is mostly in the thing that is most important to us. my wife's pregnant right now, and we sat in the same seat at the doctor's that we sat a year ago. And she had some issues last year, and we, my daughter almost came around 20 weeks.
Wow.
And they told her to go on bed rest, to not do anything, and they restricted. We couldn't travel. We had a trip planned to Hawaii. We had to cancel. We sat in the same room this year with a different doctor who's more of a pregnancy as a specialist, and she told us, bed rest doesn't work. It's complete BS. There's no research that supports it. And I'm thinking to myself, I was sat in the same seat in the same hospital. The difference was that this lady was a specialist. That's the difference.
Yep.
When someone focuses, let's say they focus on teaching people just how to write a book. They don't teach people on how to have a book, a speaking career, a product, info product business. They teach one thing,
right,
and that's all they focus on. It allows them to go deep.
Yep.
And mastery is depth. And so if you do have a vast amount of knowledge, there's nothing wrong with that. And your audience will typically want that from you as they continue their journey with you. But the entry point into your business needs to be on what you feel that you're the very best in the world at. And what you're the very best in the world at is what you've had the most experience with. That is what makes you unique. That is your story that you can share with the world. That is where you'll get the biggest lessons, the biggest ahas, and you'll be able to have singular focus. You'll be able to share paradigm shifting thoughts. That is what you need to do. So if you are right now going, man, I've got so much I could do, what's the thing you feel like you have the most experience with? And just start there.
Yep.
You'll still use everything else. Trust me. The best experts on a singular thing in the world, if you go through with their back end, they've realized that the easiest way to make money is sell more to customers. So they teach this other stuff. They just don't lead with it because the world doesn't reward generalists. And that's something it's a hard concept because you probably are always learning and you probably do know a lot about a lot of different things. And that's okay. You'll get to it. But pick one thing to go deep on. Put that as what you lead with, and trust me, it will transform your business and your life.
Yeah, most of you have a steak and you're trying to jam the whole thing down somebody's throat. Let them take a bite, and if they like the steak, then they'll buy the rest of it. But aha moments, let's engineer more of those so we can get more people to say, if this worked on this one topic, imagine if he gave me the whole thing. Carrot and stick motivation. So all of us are dominated by either the pleasure aspect more or the pain aspect more. So when we teach subjects, we typically teach it from the benefit focused. And we're taught as marketers to focus on the benefit, right? Sell the benefits, not the features, and talk about the outcomes and the solutions. But so many of us, when we teach, we talk about the good stuff, but we don't use the pain. We forget. Now, our audience is stuck more in the pain aspect. So if we talk about all the good stuff to somebody who's feeling all the bad stuff, we lose. We might as well be speaking Spanish to somebody who only understands English or vice versa. I always go both ways. I always say, how can I put this in a positive spin? And also, what is the negative ramifications of this? So earlier when I phrased it, I say, make not buying for you more painful than buying from you. That comes from that thought process. I want to make it so painful for you to not give me money that giving me money is better than not giving me money. And that's me taking a holistic approach. So when you teach something, always look at both sides of the coin. Don't just talk about all the good stuff. Talk about the bad stuff that happens if this isn't done. Or talk about the challenges that somebody faces if they don't have this. Because here's a little principle for you. People will work 10 times as harder to keep the $10 they have in their pocket than they will to potentially make $1,000. They will work 10 times as, they will stay up all night figuring out how to protect what they already have, but they'll put very little effort into expanding what they have.
And if that confuses you, just think about when you've had an opportunity to move forward with someone and you've thought of all the reasons why it wouldn't work. What if this? What if that? All the excuses you come up with. And now this is very normal. You're not alone. I'm sure you've done it at times where you had large, opportunities that require large investments. You pause and you think about it. But what that is that's us not trusting ourselves, less than us trusting the person in front of us. And the reason we do that is we know ourselves better than that person. Meaning we know what we've done in the past. We know our habits, our behaviors. We know what we're capable of. And so the way you get them to shift, the way you get them to see is that they realize where they are isn't a good place. Yeah. Where they are is nowhere near what it could be in the future. And you don't have to sell them the heaven and the hell, right? But you have to sell them the distance. They have to see that there is a brighter future. Even if they're in a great place, what if that's not the best place? And that's really what your job comes down to. And you do that simply by showing them that, hey, look, there is a better way. I know how to do it. And by staying where you are, it's only going to continue to cause the frustration. It's going to continue to cause the anxiety or the depression or whatever it is that you feel that they're at. And if we've done our job and we know where our customers are, we're meeting them in that conversation, we're going to understand that. And we'll probably understand it better if we've personally gone through that. A question that came in was from Charles about faking stories. And there's no reason to fake any story. You have your own story, you have your customer stories, or you could be telling stories of people you know that you've figured stuff out for them. So there's really no reason ever to just make a story up.
I mean, I understand the need for a metaphorical story to prove a point, but when there's real stories that can do the same thing, a metaphorical story is a poor substitute. Now, if you're selling entertainment and you're trying to tell stories to captivate people and you want to sell fiction books, then that's cool, because fiction is always more interesting than reality. But when it comes to changing people, they will resonate more with you from a reality standpoint than they ever will by manufacturing a story. I mean, yeah, Ronald McDonald selling hamburgers to kids, he's not a real clown that goes around selling hamburgers. That's a good example of a fiction or an imaginary character, but we're selling real world problems and solutions. Most of us are. We're not selling like, hey, I either buy a hamburger or I buy something from Starbucks or somewhere else. And so we should lead with the heart of a real human being who had transfer so they could step into that. And then that goes back to the carrot and stick. Most of us are dominant in one type of reality. Most of us are either optimists or we're pessimists. Most of us are either, and that changes, by the way, based on the subject. So we will be biased towards how we present information through our own worldview. We will do better if we take both sides. So we say, okay, let me look at my webinar when it's done. What did I focus on? Did I focus more on the pain or more on the gain? Well, whatever is missing, I got to come back and sprinkle some of that in. And so when I start webinars, I say, listen, here are all the reasons why you think this won't work for you. I just start there. Most of you are scared to say that. I'll say, first thing is you'll say, I have no time. Some of you say, I don't have any resources. I can barely rub two nickels together. Others of you will say, I can't do anything, Jason. I'm a complete failure. And I will say to you, well, you're the most successful failure I know, right? So are you a failure or are you not doing it the right way? I don't know. So we'll bring up the hard-hitting questions right away, because I start with the pain of where they're at, because most of them are in pain. All right. Now, I've said this before, and most of this stuff is we have to be reminded more than we have to be taught. Your goal isn't to have somebody leap from one canyon to the next, not the Grand Canyon. That's not the change you need to make on a webinar. More webinars fail because you ask or you try to make a gigantic transformation. They don't even know how to walk yet, and you're teaching them how to fly, right? That's why webinars fail. This is your advantage you have over stone cold subject matter experts who have been doing this for years, who have more proof than you, who have more results from you, who have better stories from you, and all the rest, and you can still beat them in the marketplace every day of the week, because they're asking their people to metamorph from a caterpillar to a butterfly, you know? They're not even either one of those things. Crawl before you walk, walk before you run, and then maybe we can discuss flying. And so you want to start with what's one tiny step, because the worst place somebody can be is immobilized. People feel trapped when they can't get unstuck, when they can't move forward. They feel like they're in a prison. And that's the scariest place in the world to be. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, but an object at rest tends to stay at rest. This is physics, right? A buyer in motion tends to stay in motion, by the way. That's Fladlin's law of motion, is a buyer in motion tends to stay buying. They tend to stay in motion. But we got to get them moving. Most people that come to your webinar are looking for every single excuse in the world to stay exactly where they're at, and they're stuck. Now, if you try to push a car when it's stuck, it's really hard to do at first. But once it starts rolling, you have to be careful to barely push it and have that thing roll down the hill and kill somebody, right? We have to get them moving. And so when I look at the webinar, I said, if I can get them taking one tiny step in the right direction, I have won. Because they will then want to buy my product to take more steps, take them faster, take them easier. And instead of having to take steps, we'll just pick them up in a nice automobile and we'll drive them to the finish line, right? And then the last thing is we have to restore optimism, that the world is in fact a good place and that the future is better than the present that they're experiencing. So we can't just sell all doom and gloom. We have to say, listen, once this is taken care of, one of my favorite things to ask my customers or clients is say, once this problem is solved, what are you going to do with all that extra free time? And do this to somebody sometime. Once this is taken care of, what are you going to do with all this extra time? How long do you think about this problem? How long do you deal with this problem? And you have them total it up. You spend 16 hours a week worrying over this problem, trying to solve this problem, working on this problem, right? How much do you spend meal prepping for this new fancy diet that you're on, right? This carnivore diet. Like, what are you doing right now? 16 hours a week? What are you going to do with those extra 16 hours when we solve this problem for you? And watch the blank stares you get back if you ask people. Because guess what? This is the problem. This is everything after it, and they haven't thought past the problem yet. They haven't looked past the problem. Well, no wonder they're stuck, because they can't see anything in front of them other than a brick wall. So our goal is to take a sledgehammer and bash. See? They know even, right? Our goal is to do what they just did to that constraint that doesn't allow that person to see the future. That person is not going to be helped by you or anybody else until you can show them that the future is indeed bright. So think about it from that perspective. Once we solve this problem for you, I got a new problem. Well, what's that? What you can do with all this extra time? And they say, well, I can do this, this, and this. So I had a guy, he asked me, he said, Jason, I got 7 marketing problems that I need to be solved. I got 7 campaigns I want to roll out. It's driving me nuts. I said, cool. Boom, they're all done. Now what do you do? And he goes, and I said, no wonder you don't want to do these 7 things, because you're going to be left in a state of uncertainty. Your life is going to be hell because you have no clue what's going to be done when these 7. So you're going to cling to them and never do them, so you don't have to confront the scary reality of what you're going to do after they're done. And he's like, oh, man. I go, well, what could you do? He goes, well, I've always wanted to do that. I said, so when these 7 things are done, can't you just do that? And he says, hell yeah. And I said, now what's your chance of doing those 7 things? And he's like, 100%. Because now I gave him a reason to complete these 7 things, because there's something worth living for on the other side of those 7 things. Your customers, they have a problem that's so big, they can't look beyond it. If you get them to look beyond it, look back at their problem, now all of a sudden you can give them very basic information. You want to be healthier? Here's the answer. Sleep better, eat more whole foods, be more hydrated, and do exercise. There you go. There's the magic. I have now just killed $1 trillion industry, which is the health and fitness industry, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought up that, because what was coming to my mind as we went through this was basically, I used to work with a lot of gym owners, and all of them know that healthy lifestyle is a long-term thing. It's not something you can do for 3 months and then you're good for the rest of your life. Health and longevity is something you're committed to your whole life. But nobody's going to buy a 20-year membership to your gym. Because when they come in, they have a problem, like you said, right in front of them, and they want to solve that problem.
They don't fit into their jeans anymore. They have a high school reunion coming up, right?
Exactly. And so depending on what they've already experienced is really going to determine what they'll buy into moving forward. However, everybody has a problem in front of them, and it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. And this is what's so magical, is it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you're super advanced. We all have new problems. Life is just a series of problem, solution, problem, solution. Some of us move faster. Some of us repeat these things over and over again, and it's like we're running on a hamster wheel. But because of that, the people aren't looking at, okay, first we're going to do this, and then we're going to do these 10 other things. They don't care about those 10 other things. And when you sit across the table from them and say, how much weight do you want to lose? Everybody will say a certain number, 20, 30 pounds.
Right.
Most people have double that to lose.
Right.
But if you say, well, actually, Mrs. Smith, based on our Dexter stand, you have 60 pounds to lose, it's not what they're interested in. You don't need to sell them on what they really need. You have to sell them on what they really want. Yeah. And that's really key. And I see a big problem, because you'll probably listen to this and you know that your solution isn't a quick fix. You know your solution isn't some challenge you can run for 21 days and then it takes care of them for the rest of their life. And at some level, there's this integrity issue where you go, well, I need to sell them what it is. There's nothing wrong with showing them that, but understand they're not going to buy in that in the beginning. They're going to buy into getting from point A to point B, then we sell them C, D, E, F, and G.
Yeah. And even if you don't want to sell them C, D, F, and G, you can still give that to them. But that person, when they say, I want to lose 20 pounds, they don't even want to lose 20 pounds. They have some other hidden agenda that's just an easy number that they can throw out there, right? You want to lose 20 pounds? Give me an axe and I'll cut off a couple limbs and you'll probably be 20 pounds lighter. You say, well, I don't want to do that. Oh, you lied to me then. You don't really want to lose weight. What do you really want? Our whole job is romancing that stone and figuring out that one little thing that if they had it, life would be a significant upgrade. If we do that, we can continue to sell them forever, or we can give them everything forever. But it doesn't matter. Until we give them that first taste, we're not going to be able to help them any other way. So it's your job, because somebody says who knows they should sleep better at night, but still isn't sleeping better at night. We have to get leverage somewhere, right? Everybody knows you should put the phone up an hour before you lay down, because that will wreck your sleep-wake cycle. Yet every damn night, I'm on YouTube until 10:30 at night, because finally the kids got to sleep, right? I finally, for the first time all day, I've got a half an hour to myself, and damn it, I'm going to use that phone, even though I know I'll pay for it later, right? I don't have leverage there. But if somebody taught me the right way to gain some leverage there, if the pain was great enough, which it isn't yet for me, once that happens, and if somebody came in, they're not going to give me a lecture on all the benefits of why I shouldn't do this or should do this. They have to give me they have to get leverage somewhere. They have to give me one thing. So if they said, listen, if you change your screen to be black and white as opposed to be color, guess what happens? You become less addictive to screen time, simply because the way that your brain interfaces with this now changes. And you say, wow, I can do that, right? So if I gave you 17 little hacks like that, you started saying, dang, this is really cool. Now I believe you can solve bigger problems for me, and I'm willing to pay for it. So that's the kind of content that works best. So when you're telling your message in your story, just remember that. Don't give them too much. Don't force feed them a steak all in one bite. Give them one bite and see if they like it. And if they like it, sell them the rest of the steak.
Yep. Quick question was from Tony. He's asking about, his specific question is, what is your opinion on promoting biz opportunity on a webinar versus selling a product or a course or training? You know, can it be effective? My immediate response is, if you do this right, you pretty much can sell anything.
Yeah.
And you know, I think you can see webinars being used for a lot of things. Affiliate marketers use webinars really effectively to sell someone else's product. Experts, authors sell their own stuff.
Yeah.
So there's really not an end to what you can sell, because the buying process is almost always the same. That's why Joseph Campbell, he's the originator of the hero's journey.
Yep.
And he came across that. He studied mythology, studied, you know, across cultures, and found, wait a minute, these stories are the same, they align. And then, you know, who's that writer of Star Wars? Is drawing a blank here.
Right.
George Lucas.
Yeah.
He was a good friend of Joseph Campbell. And I believe it was because Joseph Campbell gave him the hero's journey that we've seen Star Wars be the brand that it is.
Yep.
And the magic to that is like we said, it underlines everything. So it doesn't really matter what it is you're selling at the end. And we'll get into offer creation here. I think that's the big mistake people make, is they think the product is what's important. And the product is important if you want to keep selling to that audience, right? If they buy something that doesn't work, and that's why this can really, we don't want you to use this for anything but good.
Right.
But we've seen people use these things for things that aren't so good, because the structure is the same. There's no difference to sell something that's good than something that's bad. The process is the same. The difference is what comes in the future.
Yep.
So, you know, if you're just about quick money and you don't want to, you know, build wealth over time, you know, by all means use this for whatever you want. We don't endorse it. We don't want you to do that, but it'll work. Unfortunately, it won't work very long. But if you're someone who's committed to building wealth and using webinars to add value, to connect with your audience, to sell product, service, whatever it is you want, this is the best way we know. It's worked for Jason, it's worked for us, it's worked for me, it's worked for our clients phenomenally well.
I mean, I love to sell BizOp because it's a huge market and you can make a lot of money doing that. And there's a lot of people that want to start a new business. So why wouldn't I, if I can help those people do that? Now, with that said, I can teach you marketing and do okay. But if like my good friend Joe Polish, he taught marketing to carpet cleaners. And he could sell a seminar for $5,000 without a famous person. And I have to get all these famous guys like Russell Brand to sell you a $500 general marketing seminar, right? So for most of you, you don't have to do it, but there's a clue there. If people are already doing webinars and making a lot of money in this space, vertical, niche, industry field, or whatever, I like that, because I just say, I'm just going to do a better webinar, or I'm going to niche that webinar down even more specifically to an audience that's being underserved. Now, with that said, you can also do webinars to audiences that are not used to webinars. They don't have webinars, because if they're going to seminars, they're a good audience to do webinars. That's great. It's a blue ocean. If you're the first one to bring a webinar to a village that didn't have electricity and you brought electricity, that's the webinar to a niche. Now, there are some niches where webinars will not make sense. All right. So if the only thing you could sell to that audience is a $10 thing and you can't go any higher, forget the webinar. Make it an impulsive purchase at checkout. You know how when you go to the grocery store and at checkout, they have all those tabloids and those magazine rags and those trash, right? Some businesses are like that. They're just knick-knacky kind of things. And if you do a webinar, you're going to lose 20% of 20%. 20% who hit your page and register will show up, and 20% of those who show up will be interested enough to be considerate of your offer at the end. That's a lot of people you lose along the way. But the people that stay more than make up for everybody you lost along the way, because those are the serious people that you can make the difference in, right? But if you need to sell the masses some bubblegum solution, webinars ain't going to work for you. Now, I would suggest you get out of any business that's like that, because very few things are going to work for you. You know, Uber, which everybody thinks is the greatest business in the world, is losing $5 billion+ and counting. So maybe one day that will make sense, but it's still a guesswork because they're selling the most basic thing, which is transportation. Okay, so webinars don't make sense for everything, but going to a market where there's really bad webinars, which is almost every market, it's the bane of my existence. Here's my life, just so you know. I walk around seeing broken clocks everywhere, and I just want to fix the time, right? I see all these broken webinars, and so I feel like if I can help you, because I can't be in all these places, it's like draining the ocean with a tablespoon. I can't do it, right? If you can go in there and right some of these great wrongs, which are these so-called webinars that are all talk and no value or no substance, please do. And there's many of those where you can go in there and earn the right of the customer to outvalue the competitor. And then there's other markets, like we brought these real estate audiences, these webinars, and we're crushing it with them because they're not used to doing these presentations. And so the only local real estate agents in the market who license these webinars for us, they dominate, because before they ever show anybody a house, they empower them to know which house is the right house to buy. So we take a market that doesn't do webinars, plug a webinar in, we win.
And that's different than saying running a webinar, because you can charge $10 for a webinar.
And I'm going to teach that model too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just to be clear, it's more around, you know, what is it you're selling? In broad terms, the easiest thing to sell from a webinar that's going to be the most impactful is something of transformational value.
Yep.
Right. So now most things can have transformational value. So, you know, if you're kind of saying, what do I sell? What do I look at? Something that's going to take someone and essentially give them a shift that changes the way that they do life. Right. And typically those are, you know, 4 biggest markets are typically in, you know, finances, in spirituality or faith, in fitness, health, wealth, wellness, and in finances, wealth. So, you know, those are the ones, and relationships, like you said, relationships.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that we typically see work very well. In terms of what to charge on a webinar, we had a question come in and say, what's the perfect amount?
There is no perfect.
There isn't. And, you know, we've seen people sell, you know, a couple $100 products. We've seen people sell $50,000 masterminds from a webinar. So it really depends on the audience, where they are with their journey with you, what's come before it. But the way the webinars are done, it's pretty much the same each time. And I've found that it's no harder to sell a $100 product than it is a mastermind. The difference is the relationship with the person who's in front of you.
So different markets have different price points, different audiences have different thresholds, and depending on where you're at in your relationship will depend on how good you can sell somebody something. I mean, the reality at the end of the day is I don't care what you price it at, as long as it's worth your while, because otherwise why would you do it? And as long as the customer feels like they're practically stealing it from you. Like they feel almost bad. Like, does this person even know what they have? I'm ripping them off by paying them money, right? That's the holy grail. I always strive for that. How can I make it still worth my while to do it, but make the customer feel bad for me because they think I'm so stupid for pricing it so little compared to the value that they get? Which, by the way, in some markets, that's $2,000. You say, $2,000 is a lot of money, Jason. I said, if I'm selling you $1 for a dime and you knew that was a genuine dollar bill, come on now. Right? Now, when we sell transformation, we can do that. And you say, well, what about it? It's got to be just information and box courses and group coaching programs and all that stuff, Jason. Yeah, I've done that. But like we started our company selling software, just like AJ has specialized in selling software. I love software because we could teach them the information of how to do things manually and then sell them the automation via the software. Services is the same thing. You would do a webinar and say, if you were to create this thing, here's how you would have to do it. 47 steps later, you say, or we could just do it for you. And they say, thank God. Now that I know all the ways to do it on my own, now that you've told me every secret sauce and recipe on how to make my own chicken, I'm still going to go and buy the Colonel's chicken. And that's great. It's a great way to sell services. One of the best ways to sell a physical product is to give them an information kit that they get for free when they buy your physical product. So everybody buys these juicers to lose weight, right? I could outsell any juicing company by creating an information product and giving that for free if they buy the juicer of choice that I'm suggesting that they buy. Because everybody has a juicer, but nobody really knows how to use a juicer, and people would feel more comfortable. I could sell you a yoga mat. But if I gave you for free the yoga secrets of whatever, right? Some sort of yoga posture clinic, this and that, you would buy 15 yoga mats from me, even though you don't need all 15 of them, if my bonus was most attractive. And that's what we're going to talk about when we talk about offer positioning. So all prices are different. The cost of toilet paper in Iowa is different than the cost of toilet paper in Los Angeles, but they're both used for the same purpose. So it's not what you charge. Start charging something that's great and then go up from there.
Absolutely. And just in essence of time,
we're at 2 hours already.
We're just coming up to 2 hours. Hopefully, you agree the content is awesome, and you're going to stay with us as we get through the rest of the slides here. For those of you that, for whatever reason, do have to go, we understand. We will send a replay out, so you can catch the last hour or so. Once we're done, we obviously have to transcode the video and all that stuff. But we'll get that to you so you can watch that before tomorrow's training. And then, we plan to be about 2 hours every day. So, if for whatever reason you're like, well, is it going to be like this every day? We'll do our best. Unfortunately,
what, you mean great?
we joked earlier when we said we're going for 2 hours and the amount of content. We said, well, okay, we got to make sure we keep this in line. So we're gonna press on here. We appreciate you being here. Hopefully you can stick with us for the end, and we'll continue to go through the slides here. So let's move on so that we can get this content done.
So here's a little lesson for you, right? I like to give strategy, tactics, and vision. Vision is the most important, but tactics is what the audience wants. You want something you can sink your teeth into and do by tomorrow, or be able to do something specific you couldn't do before today. So this is the tactical portion of our presentation. At some point in time, you're going to have to make an offer. Doesn't even necessarily have to be on a webinar. If you want to use a long form sales page, a video sales letter, whatever it is, you need to make an offer. Now, I have perfected offer making via the webinar because it's the best place to make an offer, but it doesn't matter. The structure is this: core, price, bonuses, guarantee with scarcity laced inside and out. So what does this all mean? So what you sell, what people think they're paying money for, is your core offer. And if that's all you have to start with is like, I have an ebook, or I have a video program, or I have a software, and you want to make money and help people, then start with the core, all right? And you want to link your price to that. But what really makes the difference is the bonuses they get for free. There is no greater way you could sell anything to make the bonuses more attractive and exclusive for free than what they pay for. All right. So remember earlier when I said I could sell 15 yoga mats to somebody and they wouldn't even need all 15, but they would buy them for what they get for free. Sports Illustrated used to sell a subscription, and their best way to sell a subscription was to give away a football clock. A football clock, right? By the way, the swimsuit calendar edition has little to do with sports, but it is illustrated, I guess, right? But that swimsuit edition sells more magazine subscriptions than the magazine article content will ever sell. Your premium given away for free that they can't pay for, but they can get for free when you buy your thing, that will help you sell your offer more. Super tactical, right? But I like to give away the Ferrari if you just buy the wheels. That's my theory, right? So if we can position that, the best parts of your offer should not be allowed to be purchased, but should be given for free, because there's a psychological principle there. People, if you don't establish value, they only understand price, and every price is distasteful. But if we get them to focus on value, then price is in its proper context of whether it's a good deal or it's not a good deal. So let's talk about some of these offer best practices. So first thing is sell the outcome, not the deliverables. So we were hearing drills going on earlier today when we got in here, but nobody buys a drill for the drill. They buy the drill for the whole, right? So I think most of us forget that we are not selling. I told you earlier, I never want to do a webinar again in my life. If I could find out a way to make money without doing webinars, I'd be the first one to quit webinars. Because I don't want to do a webinar, but I love the outcome that a webinar gets me. And so I do that intentionally, so you understand that as a learning technique when I tell you that. I don't want that. So most of us say, here's what you get when you buy today. You get this widget, and you get this thing, and you get that thing, and you get this, and you get that, and you get this, and you get that. It can work, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Instead, you have to work backwards and say, what do they want? What do they stay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, worrying over, stressing out about? And what magic wand can we wave to give them that relief? That's what you sell. The delivery, the product is what gives them that. But you have to remember, we got to sell the outcome. The product is the vehicle to get there. Now, the more unique and specific you can make it to your audience, the better. And so, you know, the highest mastermind for marketing I ever seen sold was $75,000, and it was to plumbers on how to do marketing. Let me tell you something. That guy that's selling plumbers how to do marketing is not a great marketer if you were to go and put him up against the best. Some of the guys that AJ and I know that we hang out with, I can name probably 150 better marketers than this guy. But all 150 of us have never sold a $75,000 mastermind either. He didn't make his offer better. He made it more specific. And because of that, it became better. Right? So when I go to Disneyland, is it the thing in California? I can never remember.
Disneyland's Cali.
Okay.
Disney World is Florida.
Got it, right? So, and I drove past Disneyland on the way down here from LA. I passed Anaheim, and it reminded me of this story. It's like, when I go to Disneyland, I don't pay Disneyland prices that most people pay. I get the private tour package. And I think it's $10,000 now. I still have to buy the tickets, right? And I have to buy 10 spots at the private tour, even though there's 5 of us, my wife and my 3 kids, right? Because that's the only option I get. Now, what do I get when I buy the private tour, right? I basically get a fast pass to anything that I want. That's the only reason I buy it. There's a couple other perks in there. Yeah, they will put us front stage at the parade, which is cool. The kids like that kind of stuff. They will make reservations for us, as if Open Table doesn't do that with a click of a button, but whatever, right? Maybe a couple other perks. I don't care. I don't want to stand in line for 2 hours. So I'm willing to pay $10,000 to not stand in line for 2 hours, okay? Is my experience at Disneyland much different than most people's? Not really. Now, by the way, it's the same ride I'm going on. I don't get like this special ride hidden behind the curtain that nobody else gets to go on. But I do the math. I say, standing in line, I could be working and making more than $10,000. This is a deal. This is better than free, right? And so if you niche it down to an audience, if I teach a billionaire how to get better sleep, he will pay me $1 million. But if I teach a broke college student how to get better sleep, he will pay me about $0 or whatever they get when they donate plasma at the end of the month. Maybe that's what I'll get, right? So the more specific you make the offer, the better it will sell.
And back to your Disney example, they don't sell that experience on being able to go on all the rides and get all the they sell it on a time saver.
Yep.
They sell it on your ability to enjoy the park in a greater way. And that's the big thing. When a lot of people make their offer, oftentimes they want to make it about the product, not about on what the product gives them in terms of the experience and the outcome. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's important to think about things that you purchase. Typically, it's not about, the features. It is about the benefits. You hear that a lot. And I want you to understand that because that's the big mistake I see people making when they do create their offer. You're going to get this, and you're going to get that, and you're going to get this workbook, and you're going to get these notes, and you're going to get these examples. And it's never about what you get. It should be about what you're getting and what it gives you. And so that's really, really key here as you start to build your offer and apply these techniques that Jason's sharing.
You have to tell them what they get. So that way when their friends say, what did you pay for? They don't sound like an idiot and go, oh, I don't know, right? So you have to tell them for the benefit of them explaining it to somebody else. But that's not why they buy. They buy for the outcome. And you have to understand that and step into that and sell that. And then if you can make it unique and specific to the audience, the closer you can get to where somebody says that was designed specifically for me, the more money you can charge because it's all about supply and demand. If you're the only one that supplies it and everybody's demanding it, you can set your own prices. Now, I talked about this earlier, but it's an emphasis. I don't care what it is you sell. You can sell dollars for dimes. So you say, well, Jason, you're in the make money space where it's super easy. I'm like, yeah, right. Let me know when that's true because I haven't found it to be true. But the one thing we have going for us, if I say, if you pay me $1,000 and I can make you $10,000, who got the better end of the deal? It's very cut and dry. So people think it somehow only applies to the money space or investing or finances, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I don't care what you sell. we can show how it's dollars for dime. So we're selling weight loss, right? It's like, well, what's the cost of being overweight for the rest of your life and the pain that goes along with that? And if you have to have weight loss surgery, those aren't cheap. Those are very expensive. And if you hire a personal trainer and a dietitian and a nutritionist to help you out, that's a lot of money. And then pretty soon you're depressed and now you're going to see a therapist, and that's expensive as well. And then, you know, you die 10 years early, so that loses 10 years of income earning potential for you at your job. Boy, it's expensive. Or you can buy this program for $199 that will show you how to do X, Y, and Z. And that seems really, really like a good deal, doesn't it? Somebody says, why sell the relationship? I said, well, what's the cost of the divorce? You know why people get divorces, even though they're expensive? Because they're worth every penny for most people, right? But they're a lot of money. And again, seeing a therapist, seeing a psychiatrist, you know, just even paying for Zoloft every single month. How much is that going to cost over the next 10 years, right? No matter what you sell, you can translate it into a monetary number, and you should.
One of the best things to do to even add to that, to make it even more powerful, is not only what they're going to lose moving forward, but what has it already cost them up until this day. Example, you mentioned relationships. You know, what is your relationship like now? How many nights have you gone to sleep angry? How many times have you and your wife not slept in the same bed? How many arguments have you had? What is that doing to you? What's the stress? How do you feel?
Yep.
Monetarily, you know, let's say how long have you been thinking about doing this? How long have you been thinking about doing this, and how much income have you lost because you haven't taken action?
Absolutely.
Let's say you built a business that earned you $10,000 a month, and you've been thinking about doing that for the last 3 years. Well, that's a lot of money, and if you can show people that it's cost you this much so far, it's going to cost you this much moving forward.
Yeah.
How about you just invest this small amount today to make it a reality? That is going to be so powerful for that person, because again, what you're trying to get them to do, Jason mentioned earlier, the hardest thing people will do is fight for the $10 in their pocket. So what you need to do is make them understand that what they're giving you is nothing compared to what they're going to get. And that is always it's the value add for them, the ROI that they're going to get back.
Yep.
And it's not, they're not looking at it as I'm giving you $100. They're investing $100. And people invest into stocks and things like that that give them a ROI of next to nothing. Investing in themselves is going to give them the biggest ROI, but they don't realize that.
Yep.
People are always looking for can I give my money to someone else to make it work for me? Can I give my problem to someone else and let them fix it for me? The minute you empower them to say, no, this guy's going to give me the tools, and I'm going to change my life, and it's going to give me this, they realize that the ROI is infinite. And when they realize that, their earning potential or their happiness, you know, a lot of you in transformation business are selling happiness really as the outcome. How do they measure that?
Right.
It can't be by the dollars they give you. You know, and that's why we see people successfully get $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a webinar, because the person can see that it's going to give them you know, a lifestyle or an income that far exceeds that. And not only that, a lot of the most successful people, if they can see they're going to get that back quickly, right? We mentioned earlier that first step, overcoming that first step. So if there's a big investment, is the return fast or not?
Yeah,
you know, if I tell someone, hey, you're going to lose weight, you're going to lose £1 a week over the next 3 years to get to your goal, that's not as exciting if I say, well, in the first 30 days, we can lose that 20 pounds.
Yeah.
After that, it slows down. But that's what we can do. People buy into that. And so really you have to think about what's the quickest result you can get them. And then how do you frame that? How do you picture that so they can see that the investment doesn't even come close to that back? And then they think, well, even if I just get that first result and I don't get the whole thing, it's still worth it. And that's what you want them thinking, that it's still worth it regardless if they get everything you've promised. If they just got one thing you're giving them, you know, if that makes the difference, they're going to move forward with you.
So rule number 1, make it better than free, which is possible for everything you do. And then rule number 2, let them know how it's better than free. If you do just that, you're doing it better than 90%. All right, so this is another tactical thing, is most people will say no the first time they're asked to buy anything. It doesn't matter what it is. People feel like they are wanting to be empowered and in control. The best way they can be in control is not to be sold, but to choose to buy. And that's more than just an argument for semantics. And so when somebody says, no, I don't want that, and then you ask them a little bit later, they decided on their own to buy. You didn't sell them. And so most of the people that you can sell will in fact say no to you the very first time you ask them. Now here's a sad reality. Most webinars end without a single ask. of buying something. So guess how much money you make when you don't ask somebody to buy something with you? It's almost always $0. Now, most people will ask one time, and that is almost like never asking, because it's about the same result. The average times it takes you to ask somebody to give you money before the average person will give it to you is 7. All right, in a single interaction, I do 7 calls to action at the very least. If you studied and transcribed my webinars, the ones that make the more money have more calls to action. I don't think that's just correlation. I think there's some causation mixed up in there. And so we want to do calls to actions throughout the training. And so when I first present the offer, I do it very quickly. I said, when you sign up today, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get this, this, and this, which will allow you to do this, this, and this, and never have to worry about this, this, and this again. And here's what you could invest to try to get some of this elsewhere that's more expensive, higher price, this, this, and this. Here's why this is a good deal. When you invest in this, go here to get started. Example.com/go to sign up right now. And then I say, and when you sign up today, you're also going to get this bonus. And then I explain a little bit about the bonus. And I say, so go here and sign up now. And then I say, here's what else you're going to get. And then I say, go here and sign up now. New information, new decision. I don't ever hear the word no, not N-O, no. I hear the word K-N-O-W, no, as in I need to know more. If they're still on the webinar and they're asking questions, that tells me that I just need to say the right combination of things, and then they'll probably buy. And so we want to use calls to actions throughout. We have to tell them more than once, many times. So go here now and sign up. And then lastly, an offer without scarcity might as well not exist. Now, scarcity has always been one of the most powerful and impactful things you could ever do to sell anything. It used to be optional. And then I don't know if you looked around the internet the last couple of years, but a lot of people sell a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of options and opportunities for somebody to do business with someone else somewhere else, whether it's directly or indirectly competitive with you or do nothing at all. There's many substitutable alternatives. And so scarcity is the pain that is experienced or the penalty for inaction. And so we have to use scarcity. We owe it to our customers to use scarcity, because left to their own devices, they love to stay exactly the same, which is crazy because part of them wants to stay the same, but part of them wants to change, and that's why they're on your webinar. But right now they're operating the vehicle like this, 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas at the same time. No wonder they're not going anywhere. So our scarcity allows them to confront the problem. We want them to confront it, and then they have to make a decision. Is this worth enough for me to make a change, or am I okay being the same? But if we don't put the scarcity in front of them, they can put off making that decision, and then they don't have that heart-to-heart with themselves at night to really make a decision. They're still stuck in purgatory. They're still stuck in limbo. And so if I go ahead.
Well, as I said, a lot of people get a little weird with scarcity.
I know.
Right? They say,
scared of it.
well, but you know, it's a digital product. I don't have limited numbers. And we're not saying to use fake scarcity here. There's so many ways to create scarcity. You can create scarcity with a limited time bonus for the first.
I have a whole section on this.
I jumped ahead. So
I love you,
but yeah, but that's like, you know, I just wasn't sure, so we'll move on to that. But you know, if you've suddenly gone, oh wait a minute, like we're getting into pressure tactic stuff here.
Damn right we are.
Exactly, and the reason is you owe it to the person who's in front of you, because remember, like their default function is to go back to the life that you know they're unhappy with. So you owe it to them to give them every chance possible to get out. And if they still refuse the call, then that you've done everything that you could possibly do. It's your duty to help that person. It's why you're here on this earth. It's probably what you believe is your mission. And so we're giving you the formula to give you the best chance to help the people that are showing up in front of you. And without that, you risk the chance of missing that opportunity and letting that person down. So in a way, you know, it does get uncomfortable for some of us, because we're not maybe natural born sellers, and that's okay. But understand, without it, it's not you are hurting yourself, because you're hurting your pocketbook and your ability to, you know, help that person, but you're hurting the person in front of you as well. So, you know, hopefully don't turn off here. Stay with us as we go through these last scarcity things.
You're a weightlifter, right? You're a bodybuilder. You're a strong man. You don't get stronger without tearing the muscle down, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So when somebody comes into a webinar, they have more pressure on themselves than you can ever put on them. But if they're pushing on you and you're allowing them to push you over, you're not helping them. You're a pushover. You got to push back. You got to give them a stronger pressure to be better than the pressure they're putting on themselves to stay the same. And that's why we use scarcity. That's why I love scarcity, because there's never a greater tool to me than scarcity. I have to make my scarcity more compelling than their scarcity. Their scarcity is, well, what about my money? If I could spend it elsewhere. I could spend my time elsewhere. I could spend my resources elsewhere. That's their scarcity. And I got to dwarf their scarcity with an even more powerful scarcity. And that scarcity is, why are you scared to stay small when you can play big? And that's what we do. But we draw this down. Now, by the way, as an aside here, we're not going to have time to get into this today, but you might want to screenshot this or check it out on the replay. I put together a cheat sheet for you for core, price, bonuses, scarcity, and risk. So check that out. But with scarcity, I've just identified it. There are 4 types of scarcity, and only 4 types of scarcity, because I really wanted to simplify this so you can understand how easy, real world, believable scarcity is. Because by the way, it's easier to make an honest $10 million in this business than it is to make a dishonest $1 million. So use real scarcity. First scarcity is simple. Price goes up. I say if you act fast enough, it's X. However, if you wait, then it's Y. Why is it that way? So we're going to get into reason why here in a second, but just very simply, you can say, because I decided it was that way. Because I know if you sit around and diddle-daddle, that ain't going to help you. So price goes up. Second one, bonuses go away. So either by a certain date, these bonuses, you're no longer available to get them, or once a certain amount of people have bought, then the bonuses go away. These are limited in their distribution. And again, why are they limited? They're digital. You can give them to everybody. I could give them to anybody, but I decided to only give them to somebody's. You say, why did you do that? That's my offer. I can do whatever I want with it, right? And so that's bonuses. Third one is opportunity goes away. And so many things you have seen when they are launched and then they close the doors. Again, why do they do it that way? Because they want to. That's the way that they do it. And you can either like it or not like it, but that's the way that it is. And my favorite scarcity of all is the combo. Price goes up, bonuses go away, offer expires. Because man, if one element of scarcity works, why don't we just bring them all? I don't want to bring a gun to a gunfight. I want to bring a tank to a gunfight. And so those are the 4 types of scarcity. Now, if you just leave it with that and don't give a reason why, you are only using half the power of your scarcity. So you have to make it believable. So you have to explain this is what happens if you wait, and then you have to explain why you are giving the scarcity. Because otherwise it just feels like a sales tactic. People say, oh, he's just trying to get me to buy. He's just pressuring me. So if you give a reason why, and it doesn't have to be a good reason, just any reason will do, then they'll say, oh, that makes sense, whether it actually makes sense or not. Now, since you're going to give a reason, you should give a good reason, I think. So here are the ones to encourage action. This is my favorite one. This is my go-to. I say, listen, if I allow you to decide when you can do this, then you're going to do the same thing you've always done, which is never decide. You're going to sit around. How many things have you thought about for the last 10 years and still haven't done? I'm not going to allow you to do that. So here's the deal. If you don't make a decision by this date, the decision will be made for you. And you say, damn, Jason, that sounds pretty forceful. You are right. You're not playing little kid game stuff here. This isn't a game of tag on the playground. This is real people with real problems who need real help. And you can help them, or you can allow somebody who you don't know to help them, and who knows what they're going to get with that person. There are a lot of people out there I would not trust my worst enemy with, to speak of people that I care about. And so this is how we encourage action. Second thing, here's another good one. It doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't matter. They say, listen, this is a special offer, and it wouldn't be special if everybody can get it whenever they wish to. How is that special? And I say, oh, that makes sense, right? And so this is, I usually say, because you're the type of person who comes to a webinar. So if I was telling you right now, this is what I'd say. Listen, you came to the webinar today. We are 2 hours and 20 minutes and 20 seconds in. How's that for good timing, right? If I were to put a bet on anybody in their success, it would be you. Not the people who saw the emails but didn't attend, or the people who showed up and left early, or the people who didn't even open the emails up, or anybody else we couldn't reach. If I had to place a bet on anybody's success, it would be your success, who have now been with me for over 2 hours, and you're still eager to take it to the next level. So if I'm going to take a chance on anybody and give anybody the hookup, it's going to be you. So that's why if you act by this time and this date, you get this special thing that nobody else does because you've earned it. And I want to reward you for that, right? That's a good reason why. By the way, you can just copy that. You don't have to invent something if I've already spent 11 years obsessing over it. Just please use it and just give me a little bit of credit sometimes. Shoot me a testimonial or something, right? My best scarcity I have ever used it's out of my hands. So we would go to third parties and negotiate exclusive bonuses for them. We'd say, listen, here's the thing you pay that you charge people for. I want to give it to people for free. I will even pay you for it if I have to. And we will sign an exclusivity agreement that I can only distribute 100 of these licenses, 50 of these copies, or 200 of these things. So then when I get on the webinar, I says, listen, I am contractually obligated to only distribute X number. And because you're on a webinar, don't just tell, but show. Throw the contract up so it's believable. This is the contract I signed that only allows me to distribute these 100 items. So when they're gone, they're gone. It is out of my hands. If it was up to me, I would give this to everybody, but it's not up to me. But I thought it was important enough that it's better to give it to some of you than to not be able to give it to any of you. And that's powerful. By the way, it can also sell dimes for dollars. I can't tell you how many times I negotiated somebody else's $500 retail product to be included for free in my $200 special offer product. So they could buy that, not get my product, or they could buy my product and get that. The only caveat, the only catch is it's a limited edition. And then last time is to maintain integrity. And sometimes I use more than one reason why. I said, listen, if I took 10,000 of you in right now to teach you how to use WebinarJam most effectively, I couldn't really help any of you, and I would have an aneurysm by the time it was done. But by taking a small group of you, I could focus my efforts and resources on the few of you to get a majority of the results. And yeah, I wish I could take all of you, but the world doesn't work that way. So for the lucky few of you who sign up before the end of this webinar on this special offer, here's what you're going to get. And that's scarcity. People will do very little to gain, but they will do very much to move away from pain. And we want to sell the carrot and the stick. Here's all this great stuff you get if you act right away, but here's the penalty that you pay for inaction. If you think that's manipulative, let me ask you this question. What's the penalty you've paid for inaction? Because we always pay a penalty for inaction. If we wait to start that diet, that's a penalty, even if we're not buying anything, right? If we wait to make time for our children, we pay a penalty for that wait. So this is not out of nature. This is not out of the ordinary. This is how the world works, whether you like it or not. So if this is how it naturally occurs, we should use that to help them, to make the pain of them staying the same greater than them changing for the better. And so that's why I feel like you owe it to somebody in order to use scarcity. There's never a greater way to improve it. For 99% of webinars that they bring me in as a consultant, I only have to do one thing. I could charge them $50,000 to spend less than 1 hour, AJ. All I do is go in there and punch their scarcity up. And then they're like, you're a genius. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but it's like most people don't have the right types of scarcity. We'll get into this some other time. Yeah, so scarcity must have a reason why. Let's just go back to the offer page so everybody can see that. This is the offer. Final thing that I'll talk about is guarantee. I put an asterisk around this. You don't have to have a guarantee. Sometimes a guarantee doesn't make sense, but there's always a risk involved with a purchase. And if we don't do something to minimize that risk or at least address that risk, then we leave people in a state of uncertainty. And so I like guarantees and I like to sell them strong, but if there's a reason not to have a guarantee, and sometimes the reason is we make more money without a guarantee, flat out, and that's valid. So I would say, listen, we only want people that are committed. And so these are the risks involved. And if these risks are too great for you, then please don't sign up. But I will ask you this, if the risk is nothing to you and the gain and the potential is massive and you only realize just a tiny little bit of that gain, isn't that a good deal? If so, go to example.com/go and get signed up now, all right? You will not be able to catch everything that I've said today. AJ, you'll have to listen to this repeatedly, right? Yeah. And there's so much to get, and each new listening hopefully will reveal something new to you. But I bet there is a couple things that you can do right now that are making you feel excited and good. If that's the case, let me know in the chat box here, because I'm not just doing this for my own health.
Can we go back to the slide that had the sections for people, a few people?
Oh, yeah, they want to screenshot that, right?
Yeah, they didn't get the chance to screenshot.
See, that's the scarcity, right? You got to pay attention. It's gone just like that.
So obviously, you know, we mentioned to you guys, the reason we're doing this, that people are now saying, well, what's the offer? Where's the, like, wait a minute, are you pitching us?
So I do have an offer, right? Here's the offer. If you come tomorrow and show up with me live, then I will not charge you for it. But if you don't, and you miss this, and you miss the replays, then guess what? You will have to pay it. And that's the God's honest truth. So yeah, I do have an offer for you. And my offer is, let's continue this conversation tomorrow, because while it was pretty neat today and it was fun, we're just getting started.
Yeah. So, a couple of questions coming in, and we'll answer some questions, and then we'll wrap it up so that you guys can take what we've said and start digesting it. And what I would encourage you to do between now and tomorrow is actually watch this again, watch the replay, so that you can continue to digest the information and actually go through, if you haven't already, and start saying, okay, what is my story? What could I teach? Okay, how could the offer be? And actually start putting this stuff into motion before you show up tomorrow, because we're only going to continue on. And the worst thing to do is to wait, right? Is to wait until we're done these 3 days and then say, okay, well, now I'll get started. You've been here for 2.5 hours. It shows your dedication. It shows that this is important. Hopefully it shows that, we've provided some fantastic content for you. I feel like we have. I would pay to learn from myself here and mostly from you. But what I would do is really take the time between now and tomorrow and actually start going through the hero's journey. What does that look like? And start to think about the offer. Okay, because it's going to get you one step closer to doing that first webinar, to doing that first training. A couple of questions around scarcity came in, and Deborah asked about, if scarcity is so important, why are so many people now promoting lifetime access? And
because they're stupid.
Well, I think it's important to understand, what are you giving lifetime access to, right?
Who's lifetime?
Because one of the things you can do, and this is just off the top of my head here, but you could offer scarcity around, hey, look, I'm going to be doing this course live for the next 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, on Tuesdays, you'll get a live training with me. And on Thursdays, we'll do a live Q&A where you can ask me any questions. And I'll go through. I'll be giving you things to do, and you can ask me questions and get my feedback. After those 6 weeks, you'll have lifetime access to the recordings. Right. So you can go back through it anytime you want. Yeah. Anybody else who's purchasing beyond this will get those lifetime access to those recordings. So there's ways you can use lifetime access to add to the offer. The other thing is sometimes you have offers that don't go away. They are evergreen. There's no reason to take them off the market. Right. And that's when you can either bundle them together, you can add other bonuses, you can get, like you said, you can go to other software or other course providers and say, hey, look, we're doing this webinar, it's working really, really well. Can we have 100 accounts for 60 days to your software? Because we use that, or we teach that in our process. Totally. Most of the time they can do that. So even if you have a lifetime access product, it doesn't mean everything has to be lifetime access.
Right. Yeah, and by the way, lifetime, most of you, and we've all done lifetime, me included. So when I said you're stupid, I was just being flippant with my response there, is lifetime doesn't sell as well. You would sell better if you said, listen, we're going to give you 5 years access, and 1 year is typically $1,000 a year, and so I'm giving you $5,000 worth of access. That will sell better than lifetime access, because people can't conceptualize lifetime, but they can conceptualize specifics. It's a little tactical thing for you. But the other thing, too, is if you sell an evergreen offer, don't put your scarcity, if that's working for you, great. Put your scarcity on the back of that. So if I'm selling 1,000 people a month, I guarantee you there are 10 that would pay 10 times as much money to have my Fast Pass version of the Disneyland experience, where they could spend 2 hours a month with me on a private WhatsApp channel, right? And they pay $10,000 just to have me on WhatsApp for a couple times a month. So most of you, your scarcity, if it's not on the front end, if it's pure evergreen, add the scarcity to the back end. But certainly supply and demand, there's one of you, there's many of them. To a billionaire, $100 means a lot different to somebody who's homeless. So you have to understand that different things are worth different stuff to different people. And so if you have 1,000 people that you're bringing in, 10 of those will pay a premium price simply because price is nothing for them. So you should offer them that opportunity, because keeping the money to them is less valuable than giving it to you.
Yeah, and you absolutely don't have to give lifetime access either. If you're thinking around, okay, do I want to give them lifetime? Absolutely not. As you said, Deborah, people go to school, they don't get lifetime access to that class. They go, if they learn it, they learn it. If they don't, well, that's on them. Yep. So it's really up to you. Another question came in here is there a powerful way to sell planning versus sell into paying?
Planning? So here's the thing, right? If I'm going to sell insurance, I got to back the hearse up to the door. That's what I heard a sales trainer say once upon a time, and that's so true. People will not pay typically to stay healthy, but people will pay to go from unhealthy to healthy. So saying, listen, if you start in your 20s on this diet, you'll probably not get cancer when you get to 70. Let's pretend that FTC and the FDA would approve of that, right? I don't know if they would or not. Nobody would probably buy that because people can't future-proof themselves in general. They don't like the idea of prevention in advance. There are exceptions to this rule, but I like to play the odds. So if I am going to sell planning, I have to have a good reason why, or I have to work backwards still. What's the pain they're experiencing now? And if that pain continues to grow, is that a good enough thing for them to stop the small pain that they have right now? But here's the way that I like to think about it. I could sell you on brighter, wider smiles by taking care of your teeth and flossing them and doing all that stuff, right? Or I can find somebody with a toothache that can't sleep at night and sell them pain relief. Who's going to pay me more money? Who's going to be an easier sell? And so we typically will gravitate towards the pain. And here's what's cool. Once you solve somebody's pain, then you can sell planning. Because they say, now that I can think straight again, and I had a good experience with you, let me hear about that planning opportunity that you have. But the hardest thing that you can do is come up with a solution and then go try to find a problem for it. Instead, find the problem and then design a specific solution for it.
It's not that it can't be done, it's just that much more difficult. I had a friend who sold injury prevention,
right.
And he struggled for a long time. When he switched to fixing injuries, his business soared. Because oftentimes people, when they're in a good place, they're not looking for that. And I think Conor McGregor is a great example of someone who, it wasn't until he lost and was out of control that he started investing in himself. And he mentioned that he heard an interview with LeBron James, and LeBron James shared that he spent over $1 million a year to take care of himself so he could, be healthy and can continue to play in the NBA. And Conor sat back and said, I don't spend anything on myself. Because he's not thinking about that until he started to go backwards in his career.
Pain, yeah.
And so it is possible. It just becomes that much more difficult. And so you have to ask yourself, if I'm truly supposed to impact and change as many lives as possible, what's the best way to share my message to help as many people as possible? It's not about manipulation. It's really about positioning. And I think that that's what you need to understand, is that the position matters.
Yep.
And great Dan Kennedy, he says, it's message to market match. If you have the wrong message, you could have the perfect market, but it's not going to match. If you have the right message and the wrong market, it's not going to match. And so it's when everything lines up. And it's all about taking what you have and saying, okay, if I'm going to help as many people as possible, what's the format or the delivery or the positioning I have to use so that they understand the value that I have and what I bring to them? And that's what it's really about. Oftentimes, you can't really sell, people say, oh, you sell ice to Eskimo. No Eskimo is buying ice, right?
Well, if I put a diamond ring inside of it and sold it for $10, then they would pay for it, right?
So yeah, and that's what it's about, is figuring out what is it that how do you position it, and what is it that is going to create value for that person. That's really what it's about. And that's where the salesmanship and the marketing and stuff come in. And that's why you see so many people, unfortunately, who have amazing gifts, amazing value that they offer, but they do it in the wrong way and they never really get traction. And nothing's more frustrating to see that, because you meet some people and they're absolutely brilliant. They may be the best expert in the world,
yep.
But nobody knows that, because they're waiting for people to show up versus going to the people. And that's really what this is all about, is allowing you to go to the people with your message in the right way so that you can connect with them and transact with them so you can transform their life. So great question. So Diane asks about finding target clients, and I think we're going to go over most of that tomorrow with the audience.
Yep.
And then Philippi asks, a webinar should it be only controlled environment like WebinarJam, or can it be done live direct to YouTube, Facebook, or Insta Live?
So that's a good question, right? So when starting out, any webinar done in any fashion is better than no webinar done, right? So my joke is always, a sell that's 99% closed is worth exactly $0. So that perfect webinar that isn't quite ready to see the light of day is worthless. There's toilet paper that's worth more money than that webinar is, right? So get it out the door first and foremost. Now, with that said, ideally you want to use a specific platform one designed by marketers, because there's a lot of people that do webinars that are just teachers or technology companies, or they built them for, employee office kind of interpersonal connection, or they're like e-learning type of platforms. Yeah, they're webinar. And YouTube, by the way, has their version, but is YouTube a marketer? I swear to God, YouTube would do better if they hired a monkey to make their marketing decisions than the marketing decisions that they make now. So the technology is powerful, but you want technology that's designed to have the impact in the specific ways that we talked about here. So that's what you want to look at. But at the end of the day, any way that you can impact somebody is a great starting point, and then you can scale out from there. And we're going to be talking a lot about scale on day 3.
Absolutely. This question I think is important. Is it Rogerio? I think that's how Rogerio. Sorry if I'm butchering your name there, but is the solution to the problem in the core offer that you sell, or in the bonuses, or is it a combination of both? Should the bonuses be so unique that without them the offer doesn't deliver the same value?
You always want the offer to stand alone, but you want the bonuses to highlight the best parts of your offer. And so you want to drill down. So I'll give you an example. When we were selling Amazon stuff, the core offer was how to start an Amazon private label business. But one of our bonuses was what we called the China Concierge Program. And so for your first product that you would source, we would have people boots on the ground in China go negotiate with factories and help you place your first order. Now that's really powerful. And it's so powerful, in fact, that we wanted to pull it out, put a highlighter on it, and then brag about it, right? So that makes a great bonus. Now that's a bonus that you couldn't pay for, but you could get for free if you bought this offer. So see how it helps the offer, but it doesn't invalidate the offer. The offer would not be incomplete without it, but it becomes significantly better with it. Because you don't want to run this risk of your audience saying, yeah, that's not really the offer. That's just a trick to get me to buy. It's not a trick to get them to buy. It's a trick to help them understand that this is so important that I blew it up, put it under a magnifying glass to let you know so you couldn't miss how valuable this is. And that becomes your bonus. And so in a lot of instances, you want your bonuses to be so incredible, but most of them are going to be very unique and specific. So that way only pockets of your audience say, oh my God, I want that. I would buy the whole thing just to get that because that's calling me out by name. And then if you have 4, 5, 6, or 7 of those, game over.
Yeah, I like to think of bonuses as complementary, where the product itself, like Jason says, stands alone. So, and oftentimes it's what the person wants the most. So if let's say I was selling a fitness program and someone thinks they need workouts, that's what they believe they're coming. And so the whole webinar is around working out, the correct way to work out for the fastest results. And at the end, I'm selling the workout program or the 6-week process. The bonuses may include the diet that goes with it. Yep. It may include like a done-for-you meal plan, even. Absolutely. And it does. The product stands alone, but the bonuses complement and essentially speed up the process. And that's why, like, if you were selling a course on Facebook advertising, the bonus that they could get is your top 10 ads that they can swipe and deploy.
Fill in the blank graphics, right? Different audience, a way to find audience, maybe software that they can use to pinpoint and use audience insights and custom audiences and all this kind of stuff, right? So I always think about it as when a customer buys any product, it creates a demand for more stuff, right? So if we teach you, like if we gave you a webinar platform that you could use, you still would want to demand, now that I got a webinar platform, I'm going to need to have, this order design. I'm going to have to have these graphics made. I'm going to have to have a membership site where I can serve this product. And I'm going to have a payment gateway. And I heard about checkbox upsells, and now I want some of those as well. And then what do we do to sell them more stuff on the back end? So every purchase you make agitates you to want to make multiple purchases. And this is the natural state of things anyway. Now, I don't want you to buy from me and then run in 7 different directions to get 7 other solutions. If I can bring those all in-house for you and bring those to you, then that's attractive, because then I don't have to risk you doing business with some moron who's just pretending they know what they're doing, but the reality is they don't, but they sold you something that was crap, but it was in a nice shiny package, so you bought it. I'd rather bring the best to you. So that's what I look at the bonuses are. I gave you this core thing that's important to you and life-changing, but I don't have to have you go out and search for these other complementary things that I know you're eventually sooner or later going to look for anyway. They're already there waiting for you. And if you can create a bonus package like that, that's really powerful. Now, even so, sometimes, like I said, is some of the best bonuses are things nobody would buy on their own, but they would kill to have for free. So you couldn't sell the bonuses if you tried to, but they are like moth to flame exciting for people to get, because nobody else creates them. Why would they create them? Nobody would buy them, but they're unique. And what's unique and novel is attractive. And so they say, I want that as a bonus. And so that actually makes your bonus more effective. You don't overanalyze it. Most of your bonuses will become obvious when you start selling and say, why do these people not buy? They keep asking the same question over again, and I can't answer it. Damn it, let's go create a bonus that answers that. And there you go, there's your answer.
So this is great. Sandy asks, how many bonuses are too many?
Good question. So we're getting advanced here, and I don't want to get too advanced, but a bonus that doesn't add detracts. So I would rather have 0 bonuses, because every bonus can create an objection. And so if I create a bonus, say, for example, let's go back to the Amazon example. If I say, hey, listen, when you buy this Amazon product today, you're also going to go on our guided China trip. So we're going to go to China later this year, and we're going to walk the Canton Fair and introduce you to suppliers. And you're like, oh, I don't want to go to China. It's a 15,000-mile flight, and I got to pay $2,000 for a ticket, and I got to get my passport. No thanks, now I'm not buying anything, right? So any bonus that doesn't improve the offer detracts from the offer. So I would rather sell something that starts with no bonuses to make some money and test it out with offers, audiences, and then add 1 bonus, see how that plays. And then if that works, add a 2nd bonus, add a 3rd bonus. So I'd rather have 1 really powerful, attractive bonus and just crush it with that, and then add the 2nd, and then try to add 7 lackluster bonuses. Quantity is not greater than quality. So start with 0 bonuses, so you can just sell something. And then as soon as possible, make your first amazing bonus, and then your 2nd, and then your 3rd. Yep.
Great. So we're gonna,
third-party bonuses.
Third party, yeah. We're gonna
hold on. The best bonuses are other people's stuff. So you go to somebody and say, listen, every time I sell this person, I get a $500 buyer. Now, when you advertise to people, I bet it's not free, is it? I bet you pay something for that. What if your advertisement could be this product? Every buyer I get, I'm going to do my best to put this in front of them and sell them on you. So when they get your thing and my product, they're going to have an opportunity to know more about you. Would you be willing to give me your thing for free in exchange for me giving you a strong endorsement if they want to do more business with you in the future? Is that cool with you? Because information is free to deliver, only an idiot would say, no, thank you. I don't want to be in front of your buyers. I don't want free marketing and advertising. And unfortunately, in a planet of 7 billion people, there's a lot of idiots out there. But there are a lot of people that aren't idiots as well. And so I could go out there and I can negotiate 10 items that each sell on the open market for $100, put them all in a package that I myself charge $200 for. And now I'm giving you $1,200 of retail at $200 because I was smart enough to engineer a solution where the sum of the parts was greater than the whole. So there is no excuse other than you like being poor more than you like being rich. That's the only excuse that I could think of. So even if you don't have bonuses, other people have the perfect bonuses for you. And the best bonus packages that we've ever created was going out and putting other people's stuff in our stuff.
Fantastic. All right. So today we've gone over structure, we've gone over story, and we've gone over offer. And as I mentioned earlier, I would highly encourage you to go back through and really get a start on this so that tomorrow you're ready for that next thing. Tomorrow we're going to be going over audiences, and really we're going to be sharing what we found, to take followers and turn them into fanatics. We'll be sharing how to tap in and leverage other people's audiences. And we're going to be showing you how to use cold traffic and what to do in order to convert those people into clients. So we're really going to go through that. And by the end of tomorrow, you'll not only know how to run the webinar, you'll know how to fill your webinars. And then on day 3, we're going to get into the marketing, scaling, and automation of those webinars so you can expand your reach and impact and really resonate, connect, and grow to as many people as you want, with no limits there. And so we'll show you how to take those webinars, how to automate the webinars, and turn them into machines that work for you 24/7, 365, so that you can make money while you sleep, quote unquote. And there's still stuff that needs to be done, but we'll give you the path to that and show you how to really leverage webinars in your business to take it to the next level. So thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you staying to the end, and we can't believe that everybody stuck around. And we're really happy you did. Can't wait to see you tomorrow and the next day. So talk to you then.
Bye now.